Wireless mic check 1 2. Wireless mic check check.
It's not like Earl and Wine with a team that walks like very strong. Nobody's gonna be looking forward to it.
and welcome to PSEP's February 2020 meeting. As my esteemed co-chair would say, it's time to get this party started. That esteemed co-chair is dialing in here. He's visiting family overseas, and we appreciate him staying up till all hours of the night. So thank you, Lakiana. Just quickly, let's introduce ourselves so everyone in the room knows us. We'll start down at this end with Patrick.
Patrick Nolan.
Taji Chesimit.
Amy Anderson, member of PSEP.
Elliot Young, member of PSEP, alternate steering committee, co-chair.
Marcia Perez, chair of the Racial Equity Subcommittee.
Vadim Mazursky, settlement subcommittee, as well as the secretary of PSEP.
Andrew Calick, co-chair.
Britt Masbach, youth co-chair.
Yolanda Salguero, also youth co-chair.
Steve Trujillo, Settlement Committee.
Thank you, everybody. February, as many of you know, is the month of the year designated as Black History Month, and so the committee wanted to acknowledge all of the various celebrations, commemorations, and conversations going on this varied and myriad topic throughout the city this month. It's a striking thing that history is not only something that you sort of look back on, but also something that you were living in and moving toward. And I think there's no better month of the year to think about that than this one. And I want to thank everybody who's been part of those conversations this month. We have a packed agenda tonight. We have a presentation and a Q&A with representatives from the DOJ, and thank you to them for joining us on the eve of a court hearing tomorrow. As well as a discussion of PSEP's approach to the court hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Before getting to those items, we wanted to acknowledge several events this month that speak to the continued struggle to achieve equitable policing, the dangers that law enforcement face every day, and the challenge and importance of the work that we are doing together to foster engagement and improve policing in our community. As most of you probably know, news this month broke of a settlement between the city of West Lynn and a 48-year-old Portland man who was subject to false arrests and abusive and racist tactics, all to serve the interests, reportedly, of the then chief of police's friend. I'll refer you to reporting in the press on this incident for more details, but suffice to say, the facts as presented describe appalling and outrageous acts by several members of West Lynn's law enforcement, the very types of acts that undermine trust between police and community and make it more difficult to achieve the type of safe, equitable policing that we deserve in this city. If time allows tonight, and we put this as a last-minute addition to the agenda, we'll provide a further forum for community dialogue on this incident, and if we run out of time tonight, we'll make sure that there is time next month in subcommittees and in the full board for further discussion, because there's certainly a lot to digest and discuss. While I can't speak for all my colleagues, I certainly am pleased that several district attorneys, as well as the governor and the U.S. Department of Justice, have indicated their intent to launch investigations into this matter. And to that end, I wanted to invite Commander Parman of the Portland Police Bureau to address the role of the PPB in this matter and any investigations that are underway.
Thank you very much. My name is Brian Parman. I'm the commander of our Professional Standards Division. So we learned of this incident through the media reports. We opened an investigation as it relates to the conduct of the Portland police officers who had some involvement in this case. And in the very early stages of our investigation, we had a conversation with IPR, and in consultation with them, IPR has assumed as the primary investigating entity. So as is customary.
What IPR is just.
I'm sorry, Independent Police Review. Sorry. I always forget the acronyms. So Independent Police Review has opened their investigation, and we're providing them documents and whatever support they need to complete their independent investigation.
Thank you. Appreciate it. In addition to these events in our backyard, I also wanted to note the attempted murder of law enforcement officers in New York, one of several targeted and premeditated attacks on police officers in recent months. Our thoughts are with the officers as they continue their recovery and to others affected by this senseless violence. This violence is not only an attack on individuals, but threatens to undermine the ability for police and community to interact in a manner that builds trust. In fact, the NYPD commissioner said that the shootings have actually led the department to reevaluate precinct security to determine whether they should be strengthened to ensure officer safety. And the commissioner specifically added that precincts have to be secure while also facilitating an engaging atmosphere so citizens feel comfortable to come in and seek help. That's the balance we strike, the commissioner said. And it's a balance that permeates much of the work that we do right here in Portland as well. Two more items before we turn to our moment of silence. We hosted a forum with PPA, Portland Police Association President Daryl Turner to talk about the police contract that is currently being negotiated. A report was issued by Commissioner Hardesty's office in conjunction with the mayor's office, based on 2 listening sessions that they held about that contract, and I encourage all of you to take a look at that report. It goes over several themes that were discussed by the community. And finally, I wanted to mention that our PSEP staff, who we are always grateful for, sitting right here at our back table, is going to begin to formally track outreach of individual PSEP members with various thought leaders and community groups. It struck us that you might see us up here once a month, or maybe twice a month if you come to a subcommittee meeting, but many people at this table, in fact everybody at this table, has conversations with all sorts of groups around their networks to try to engage them on the issues that we are tackling and to gain their wisdom about how we should be going about our business. And so we'll try to be more clear about those engagements as they take place. Now we'll take a moment to recognize folks who have passed on in the last month. We do this every month as a way to reflect. You'll see here that we have candles up front and a box where, thank you, Elliot, where you can place the name of anyone you'd like, who you're thinking about at this time. So please feel free to come up and insert something into the box if you so choose. And in the meantime, we'll take 30 seconds of silence to remember those we've lost. Thank you. We'll leave the box up here if folks want to add names during the meeting. First item, next item on the agenda is new member introduction. So a couple of notes here. We have 2 new members seated this month. They have not gone through all of the training, so they are not voting members, but Taji is with us tonight, sitting up here, going to be providing his wisdom and feedback. He just can't vote, not until next month. This process now is a process that we have gone through periodically where we, as a PSEP, recommend alternates to the mayor for appointment. And tonight we have 3 candidates. Their bios were at the front table, and we'll be voting on to recommend 2 of them to be seated on the PSEP. I know that I've seen at least 2 of them tonight, but I'll ask them to come forward if they so choose and tell us a little bit about themselves and what makes them want to serve on this committee. So in order of their bios, Andre, let's hear from you first. It can be anonymous.
Hi, thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Andre LaRoche. I'm a recent addition to the Portland metropolitan community, and yet PSEP's work is already near and dear to my heart. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew local law enforcement by name and by their history. There was, no one saw Sergeant Rumsfeld, they knew Kathy. No one knew Sheriff Allen, they knew Jimmy. And I saw how this tight connection between law enforcement and the community that they policed resulted in a strength between law enforcement and the community that endured difficult times. When I left the familiarity of my small town, I saw and to attend school up in Seattle, I saw that sometimes that strength isn't always there. I experienced racial profiling, and then later, as someone with bipolar disorder, I saw how, firsthand, how mental health events can lead to tense confrontations with law enforcement officers. Now that I'm been selected as an alternate, I look forward to any opportunity I can to be a valuable addition to PSEP's mission and help promote safe and equitable policing of Portland's community. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Albie?
Hi, my name is Albie Lemos, and I'm here as a alternate, or rather, we've gone through some process with that. But first, I would like to do a bit of a land acknowledgement of where we actually are and the people who have inhabited this place that we call home and are a guest to, the Chinook Nation, as well as people who have made up the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, of Grand Ronde, Umatilla, and Siletz. I myself am an indigenous person to this nation, the Chumash people of California. I have worked in the Native American community for almost 10 years, and I've been able to be a social worker in working with folks with severe and persistent mental illness. It's been a privilege and an education working with my people, this country's first police people and detained people. I'm here to be a listener and provide any insight that I can to this amazing effort. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anne?
Hi, I'm Ann Campbell. To move this down. As my bio states, I retired from public service. I worked at Portland Community College for 25 years in non-credit community education. I have a lot of history bringing together groups of people to promote education, lifelong learning, and discussion. Throughout my career, I also became interested in mediation, and in 2000 went through a mediation training program through the city of Beaverton. I was then a neighborhood mediator with them for a few years. I went to small claims court of Multnomah County and did mediation, and then joined the Shared Neutrals Consortium at PCC of state, local, federal agencies, and I mediated workplace mediation for many years, mostly in the Portland metro area. I also have been a volunteer in hospice for the last number of years, and I think what I bring to this group is my interest in community. I've lived in Portland most of my life. I have learned very good listening and communication skills and the ability to bring groups together and maintain neutrality. I believe in Portland there's a lot of work to be done to help our community, all of the people in our community feel safe, the people that live here and the people that work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. So what'll happen now is we'll take any PSEP comment on the alternates, and then we'll take public comment, and then PSEP members will vote again for two of the three. All of them remain alternates at this point. What we are doing is voting to recommend two of them to the mayor for appointment to open seats. So PSEP comment on any of the candidates.
I think it's really important to recognize that all three of them are very good candidates, and that somebody just has to wait a bit longer to serve.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick.
I agree as well. I want to thank all the candidates for coming here and speaking about their backgrounds and what they have to offer. I think all three candidates are excellent candidates, would be in addition to the committee.
So just clarity, there are 2 positions open.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no additional PSEP comment, any comments from the public on our alternate candidates?
Hi, this is Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. I don't have a comment, it's a question. Can you tell us who the 2 seats are that these people are filling, who has left the open seats? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the question. The 2 seats are Lakeisha Dumas and Patrick. This will be Patrick's last meeting tonight. Okay. PSEP members, you have your ballots. If you don't, let me know. You have your ballots. Mark two members. I know it says PSEP member name. You do not have to put your name up top. It can be an anonymous ballot that you then pass down to the end. Thank you. Okay, is that everybody? We got everybody? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Moving on to subcommittee reports. We're going to start with the steering committee. We have a couple members of the steering committee here. Anybody want to give the report from last month? I forget what the minutes say, so I'm going to. So I'll skip to something that I remember what the minutes say, and then we'll find the minutes for the steering committee. So we'll start with settlement agreement and policy. We hosted the compliance officer community liaison for a discussion of their latest compliance report. They presented that report, took questions from folks in attendance. In addition, we took up one issue that the Portland Police Bureau had asked us to weigh in on, which was a door drop campaign that they are undertaking in certain neighborhoods in response to gun violence. We solicited feedback again from both members and community members who attended, and we provided that feedback in aggregate form to the Police Bureau in advance of their deadline for feedback on that campaign. And that is posted in our minutes on the website. I'll turn to Britt and Yolanda now for Youth Subcommittee.
Sure, and I'll get us started. So we had our meeting a few weeks ago, and it was actually the first meeting where Taji, our new youth member, was present. So it was really great to have him out there. He came forward with a number of good ideas. We started by talking about the survey that we've been working on implementing in schools, have a few updates on that. First of all, as we shared last meeting, we'd submitted it to the IRB or the PBB to make sure that we had everything in place structurally to implement that. Right there. PBS, excuse me, Portland Public Schools. And then we just heard back from them actually this past week. There are a few things they're asking us to change, so we're going through that process right now, but our timeline stays the same. We're hoping to implement it in the next 2 months, and to make sure that we get that all completed, get our responses by the end of this school year. Then that led us to talking about what we want to do with the data and how we want to proceed after we actually implement the survey. So in coordination with Taji, as well as everyone else that was there, including Yolanda and some community members, we talked about doing a town hall where we bring in some students who would elect to come based off the survey and an invite that we'd send out to schools, as well as others in the community, talking about talking specifically about some components of the survey, things that we want to maybe turn into policy recommendations that we as a subcommittee could ultimately make. So some more nuances on that topic about what the event could look like, who we'd bring to the table, and that's definitely still an early discussion, but we want to make sure that we have something in place so that when we start getting data back, we're able to use it in a productive way. And then Yolanda has an update on some other outreach that we're doing.
Thank you, Britt. I'll just add that also in our youth meeting, in regard to a future town hall meeting, we talked about in depth about accessibility and making sure that the venue is accessible to folks. And so I believe we narrowed it down to a Portland Public School location. And so after we can kind of solidify more on the survey, we're going to solidify that location and date. But in regard to the we're still trying to move forward and trying to create a relationship with McLaren Correctional Facility. And thank you to Ross Caldwell from Independent Police Review. He connected me to Joe O'Leary, Director of OYA, and then Joe O'Leary connected me to Mark Greenwald, which is their research director. And so we are in the process of trying to schedule a conference call to move forward, and I've sent over my availability, so I'm just waiting for his response back to see if any of the 4 options I sent him will work. Thank you.
And I just want to add to that, because Yolanda also brought up some important details about the town hall. We plan to have an update on what that's going to look like next meeting, and maybe even a date at that point and location, so we can share it with you. You can get it out to your networks. We want to make sure we have a good attendance and a common understanding about what that looks like. So we'll have more next time.
Terrific. Thank you both. And thank you, Taji, for joining the committee. Marcia, racial equity.
Yes, thank you. So we met last Thursday on our scheduled meeting time on the third Thursday of every month is when we meet. This was the first meeting that I facilitated as the new chair of the committee. Unfortunately, Lakiana was not there. He's out of the country. We followed up regarding the procedural justice statement recommendation that was passed by PSEP last month. And we talked about what the process would be in learning the directive review and development process. We're waiting for the chief's approval to determine, and then we hope that we would be involved in a collaborative process if that is approved by the chief. Although the procedural justice recommendation is consistent with many of the standards of policing already, we hope that there's going to be a greater emphasis on upholding a higher standard of such a policy concept, especially with marginalized communities. We also discussed a 6-month plan. We didn't get into the full 6 months, but we talked about what's already aligned with existing groups in the community related to groups meeting around police issues and racial equity. We also talked about strategic planning and best ways to outreach. So I developed a 1-pager for PSEP, and we're going to be doing a strategic plan, kind of 1-pager for the racial equity subcommittee meeting, and that I think simplifies our outreach efforts for committees or communities that we're trying to outreach to and leverage our personal and professional networks. Our next steps are going to be continuing to do some strategic planning. Subcommittee members will be meeting to discuss the 5-year PPB racial equity, their equity strategic plan that already exists. And then we are interested in co-hosting a meeting with the racial equity and the mental health subcommittee meeting. So I'll be doing some outreach to talk about what that would look like. And again, just trying to figure out best ways to do outreach and conduct what does a town hall actually look like. So we got into the weeds about talking about how we can be really intentional when we're trying to solicit information of communities to build trust and relationships with police.
Terrific. Thank you, Marcia. Subcommittee for People with Mental Illness, Patrick.
Yes, we had a person from the Brain Injury Alliance of Oregon come and speak to us about traumatic brain injuries. And then the rest of the time was personal discussions around plans moving forward.
At this point, having already acknowledged that I believe that Patrick will be resigning from the committee and the subcommittees, I would like to nominate Amy Anderson as the new chair of the subcommittee for people with mental illnesses. I believe that she has a background to bring people to the table that we need to hear from, and would be a great addition, as well as a listener and a spokesperson for voices that need to be heard. And I'll be glad to help Amy in any way that she would like, if my help is needed.
Thank you, Vadim. I definitely would appreciate your help. For the folks in the community, this year I celebrate 23 years as a volunteer jail chaplain in Multnomah County Detention Center. I've been working with women who are marginalized and have severe and persistent mental illness for over 23 years. And in the community, I currently work for an organization providing supportive services as a forensic peer support specialist. So my history is, shall we say, deep in the woods of what's going on in our community. And I very much am excited about this opportunity to bring together the folks who I've worked with over the years and some of the committees I've sat on, so we can start building a robust community where we can have conversations that go back and forth and actually end up with recommendations we can move forward with and have a really much bigger alliance with the Portland Police Bureau and the BHU, Behavioral Health Unit, and the rest of my partners on this committee. So thank you for the nomination. I'm going to accept it this time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Vadim, and thank you, Patrick. Leadership of the committee has been exemplary all along from the get-go. So thank you. Lakiana is actually, well informed about what happened at steering, better than I had recall. So I'm going to ask him to provide the update and see if this works. Go ahead, sir. You there?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening from Monrovia. Hope everybody's doing well. Steering committee met Tuesday, February 11th. Spent a lot of time talking about the PSEP retreat that happened in January and some of the outcomes that came from that. And then spent a considerable time talking about the court statement that will be discussed later on in the meeting. A large portion of that just was around creating a summary that was more friendly to the public and people who might not read the entire document. We spent a lot of time through email just tweaking that. So just trying to craft something that, like I said, was accessible to people who wanted a more in-depth reading and people who just wanted to kind of know the facts on that. And then also talked about how post-settlement, as we look to the future, how we continue to have support from City Council. The mayor has said publicly multiple times that he wants to help PSEP be a permanent piece of Portland City Council. So looking at our different options and really how we just solidify our committee on that front. And then finished up the meeting talking about changes with the subcommittee for people with mental illness.
Thank you, Lakiana.
Thank you.
Last on the subcommittee reports is a new piece where we're calling upon the city to give any updates it might have on recommendations that have been provided to City Hall and to the Police Bureau. And so for that, I'm going to call on Robert King to provide any updates that he would like to on behalf of the mayor's office.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Robert King. I'm the Public Safety Advisor for Mayor Wheeler, and wanted to give everybody just a quick update. At one of the recent steering committee meetings that I attended, we had the conversation and the discussion about PSEP recommendations to both the mayor and to the chief. And as a result of that, and as a result of the fact that I am relatively new in supporting your efforts, of course, Nicole Grant had previously been involved in helping and is on maternity leave and has two beautiful little baby girls. But as an attendee at the steering committee, there was a question that arose about the recommendations. The recommendations that you make are a critical element of the work that you're doing to provide information both to the mayor and the chief for them to review and consider. And according to the agreement, there's 60 days for them to reply back. So I'm going to just very quickly go through a list of the items that are in the city's possession and that they have acted on up to this point. One was back in February of last year, and it had to do with the community engagement plan. And the chief, in that case, Chief Outlaw, accepted all 5 of the recommendations, and they were incorporated into the 2018 report. In May of last year, you additionally, you made recommendations on the community engagement plan metrics. Now, through, I think, kind of an administrative glitch, this information didn't make its way to the police bureau or to the city. We've just, in the last, I think, month or so, recognized that, and the chief and the mayor are in possession of those, and they're working through the recommendation to add much of what you have suggested, and we'll have an update for you about that particular recommendation shortly. In June, again, there was a recommendation that you made about the community engagement plan. PPB responded, and they incorporated all 3 items that you had mentioned in your recommendation, so I wanted to make sure you knew that. In July of last year, there was other recommendations made about the 2018 annual report, and there were 9 items, you might remember, that you made recommendations on, and PPB made the changes to the draft that could be easily achieved in order for your recommendations to be implemented. And I have some more specific language on that I won't go into right now, but I want to make sure you knew that that was acted upon as well. And then, very importantly, in September of this last year, you made your recommendations on the officer wellness program. It's one of the pillars mentioned in the 21st century policing from President Obama, and one of the recommendations made by the Department of Justice for the police bureau or for police agencies to have a well-functioning wellness program. The police bureau accepted your recommendations. They have a wellness program now that has been implemented. Many of you probably saw the reporting that was on television about that a week or so ago. It featured the service animal that the police bureau now has and talked a little bit about what that program is. It has been very well received in the police bureau, and I know that officers and their families are genuinely grateful to have that support from the police bureau, from the city, and from all of you as PSEP and the community. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that is well underway and very effective, and you had a hand in that in the recommendations that you made. And then lastly, you've made 2 recommendations, one related to procedural justice policy, and the other having to do with body-worn cameras. We just, the mayor and chief took possession of those January 28th, and so they're in the process of reviewing both. We had a body-worn camera work session that was scheduled within the last couple of weeks. It was set over, so that we'll get you a new date on that. So when the body-worn camera work session happens, I know you all will come. The PSEP will have a presence at that meeting and can talk specifically to council about your recommendations. And the other, related to the procedural justice policy, will be used and incorporated into the process that's used to develop those procedures or those directives. So I want you to know that it was important to me, new on the committee, coming in to do the work on your behalf and be supportive of the mayor's vision for PSEP, that I was able to tell you what each of them are, give you a brief update on what the progress is, and let you know how critically important the work that you're doing is, and specifically the recommendations that you're making, how important they are, both the mayor and to the chief. And then I just want to close on this last point, and I mentioned this at the steering committee, the most recent steering committee. Commissioner Hardesty, at a recent city council meeting, was very emphatic about, many of you probably are aware of this, very emphatic about her support of PSEP. And she even indicated that she was very skeptical that PSEP would be able to do the trust rebuilding work or building work that needs to happen in the community. And she went on record as saying that she was wrong in her assessment about that. She stated it twice, and she wanted to make sure that everyone knew that that was on the record, and that she respects the work you're doing and has confidence in the work that PSEP is doing, and will continue to do, and that support and that trust in you and that confidence in the work that you're doing, the difficult work that you are doing now and will continue to do on behalf of the community and police and the relationship, is supported by Commissioner Hardesty and supported by the other commissioners, Commissioner Udaley, Commissioner Fritz, and then, of course, very supported also by the Commissioner of Police and by the Mayor, Ted Wheeler. So thanks very much for letting me give a report.
Ask you a question. There are three other recommendations, at least three, to my knowledge, that you didn't mention. One was a recommendation made about the settlement agreement, specifically about the mental health section of that. There was another statement that was sent to the mayor and to the chief of police about the killing of Coben Henriksen. And there was also a recommendation about union negotiations. And in your account, you did not mention those. So Theo, I don't know, did those get to the city?
They did, and I'm sorry that I don't have the comprehensive list. I do have the union contract item that was directed to the mayor for his action. And the other two items, I'll have to follow up on to get a specific answer to. I apologize that I don't have those two items that I can update you on tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Robert. We are going to move the agenda to our presentation from our guests from the Department of Justice. Can we adjust this central microphone down, or?
Do you want the microphone at the table?
Yeah, you can hold on to the microphone.
Yeah, we can take it off.
Whichever works.
This one at the table.
Thank you.
I will let you guys have this one.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening. I'm Jared Hager, Assistant United States Attorney, and I'm with my colleague, Jonas Geisler, Senior Trial Attorney with the DOJ Civil Rights Division, and Adrian Brown, another Assistant U.S. Attorney in the District of Oregon. We thank you for the opportunity to present to you once again. But before we begin, I do want to remind the committee and the public that the day-to-day work on this case is managed by career attorneys of the Department of Justice. And we aren't driven by personal creed or political ideology, but we take an oath to uphold the rule of law and are committed to faithfully monitoring the city's performance on behalf of the United States. Tonight we'll take about 20 minutes to briefly summarize the Department of Justice's assessment of the city's compliance with the settlement agreement, and then respond to your questions and comments. We've divided our labor by reference to the agreement's 7 substantive sections. Jonas is going to speak to sections 3, 4, 7, and 8. I'll address sections 5, 6, and 9 with an assist from Adrian on section 5. The DOJ's compliance ratings reflect thousands upon thousands of hours of work put in by us, our colleagues, and our expert consultants. And 3 aspects of the agreement, which are often overlooked, they bear mention before we begin. First, the agreement didn't envision federal government oversight permanently over the city of Portland or its police bureau. In fact, the agreement anticipated 5 years of compliance assessment ending in 2017. Second, the agreement binds just the city and its bureaus and its employees, not private hospitals, not the state nor the county, not other cities or other police departments, and not this committee. For example, where the agreement requires the city to provide you with certain authority and certain data, the city's compliance doesn't necessarily turn, in our view, on what you do with that authority or that data. Third, the agreement represents a floor. It's the foundation upon which constitutional policing can be ensured. It isn't a ceiling, and it doesn't demand perfection, though that's its aspirational aim. Rather, the agreement requires substantial compliance, and that's defined as allowing minor or occasional deviations that aren't systemic. The PSEP, you guys, of course, can push for further, and that's your role in this process. The last time you invited Jonas and I to speak was at your May 2019 meeting, after DOJ reported substantial compliance with sections 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That report also found substantial compliance with 27 of the 33 paragraphs of sections 8 and sections 9. In other words, I want to underscore that the city was very close to achieving substantial compliance last year, and over the course of this year, they've continued to work diligently to meet their obligations under the agreement. Our most recent report found substantial compliance with the 6 open paragraphs of Section 8 and Section 9. So to be clear, as of January 10th, 2020, the Department of Justice has found the city in substantial compliance with all components of the agreement. What that means is, pursuant to paragraph 175B, substantial compliance must be sustained for 1 year before the United States and city can then move to dismiss or ask the court to dismiss the case. This means that we'll continue monitoring the city's performance for the rest of 2020 at a minimum, and we intend to file a compliance assessment report at least a month before any future court hearings, the date of which we'll expect the court to set tomorrow. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jonas for an overview of sections 3 and sections 4.
Would you prefer I stand or sit?
However you're comfortable.
Okay. We'll stay consistent. So my name is Jonas Geisler. I'm with DOJ Civil Rights Division, pardon me, in Washington, D.C. And I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you, but I'd just like to take a moment to say hello. Please call me Jonas, and please ask me questions if you please, and let's try to be conversant on this. I've been doing police cases for about 16 years with DOJ all around the country, different police departments, and I've been on this case since its inception, so I have seen the process play out in this city. We have approved compliance ratings. In May of 2018, we submitted a compliance report, and when last I spoke to PSEP, we went over that report. So forgive me if any of this is remedial, but there are no new ratings for the force and EIS and training sections. So I'll revisit those ratings. If any of it's too slow or remedial, I can skip over it. Let me know. So with respect to force, before we submitted the 2019 compliance report, we had already approved a revised force policy. They call it 1010. It's their principal force policy that governs all their sorts of different items that they use. We reported that the implementation of the approved policy would require further training, specifically concerning de-escalation, as that was one of the focuses and requirements of the settlement agreement. We've had time now to see the results of the training play out. In the monitoring period for that last report, we saw that the training stressed critical decision-making. It was a new model for the Portland Police Bureau, and de-escalation. The compliance officer and DOJ both reviewed and edited lesson plans and instructional materials. These were for the in-service training for all sworn members of the Police Bureau. And like before, PPB had trained all officers in the use of force policy, both in classroom setting and importantly through scenarios. That is where they act out pieces. And I know that a couple of the members I've had the privilege of being with a couple of weeks ago, they participated in the scenarios. I thank you for doing that. I found that time productive. PPB gave even greater emphasis to de-escalation through the course of interaction with subjects. Importantly, PPB conducted a separate training for supervisors, so a new supervisor level training, sergeants and above, that concerned the reporting requirements for force investigations, including what they call policy 10-10-10, that's response to the most critical incidents of uses of force. We observed implementation not only through the assessment of force reports, but also through ride-alongs with police officers themselves. And even though the agreement doesn't specifically require that we assess the field training officer or FTO training, our expert, along with me, we did conduct ride-alongs with the FTOs. They call them coaches. And we found that the coaches often quizzed trainees on the policy requirements and had them walk through day-to-day, call-to-call, what they have to do as a police officer. PPB force reports show frequent use of de-escalation and utilization of special units, including the Enhanced Crisis Intervention Team. PPB implemented more rigorous force audits, so that's when they go and look behind the force reports themselves. I'll try to scoot behind Adrian so I can see all of you. We also looked at the outcomes. We have a comparable period of time. So the outcomes for the fourth quarter of 2017 compared to the fourth quarter of 2018 show a 22% decrease overall in the uses of force. This is also during an era where we had required and checked a more rigorous force reporting system than when we first walked in the door and not all uses of force were reported. One of the principal concerns of our 2012 letter that initiated this was based mainly on the 2010 data. PPB's use of electronic control weapons during that time was a principal focus of that letter. Data now show that ECW use has dropped significantly since our investigation began, and even with a slight increase with the increased reporting to which I referred, ECW use overall remains considerably lower than when we began. If you had been to court last year, you would have seen the slide in which we saw the precipitous decline of ECW use over time. That's a significant step forward. When PPB does use force, there's another outcome. PPB has continued to internalize the value of providing aid to subjects. Recall in our original letter, that was not always the case. When a subject is injured by police, the police provide the aid directly when they can do so. We saw the police practice that value many times, including providing immediate aid to a non-lethal officer-involved force. For training, Section 4 of the agreement, I've reviewed training 2 weeks ago, but the assessment rating is based upon the May 2019 report. We don't have a new assessment approved yet. PPB responded to the needs assessment, separately providing a supervisory training and requiring a separate in-service training for supervisors and all sworn officers. PPB employed a competency-based evaluation. That is, it's not didactic. People don't just sit there and absorb as though you're watching television. One must actually demonstrate skills. It could be a written test, it could be a scenario. Officers had to demonstrate proficiency in required skills they learned, and the instructors critiqued the outcome of each scenario. There was a common rubric, so there was a consistent scoring across all Police Bureau members. Skills training for ECW continued, including quizzes on the policy requirements as well as a proficiency demonstration. PPB shored up the 2 areas that we had previously noted needed improvement. First, PPB developed a more comprehensive training plan to address the more than just the basic in-service needs. The plan was responsive to PPB's needs assessment. That's the way it should go. You plan your training based upon what you need to teach each year. PPB's plan was responsive to the needs assessment, incorporating equity, procedural justice, and use of force decision-making and de-escalation. Second, the second area they had to shore up, PPB utilized the Learning Management System, it's a computer program, to actually track the training that each officer undertook. There shouldn't be any excuse for an officer missing training. It's all tracked now. For the EIS, the Employee Information System. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll do 7. There we go.
Just in case we get a little monotonous, we'll switch up the voice. To go in order, so that's 3 is on force, Section 4 is training, Section 5 is community-based mental health. And to answer your question, Elliot, to Robert King, I believe your settlement agreement recommendation was to the compliance officer to revisit the rating of section paragraph 89. You're also free to make recommendations to the Department of Justice, and I take that recommendation as coming to us as well, since it's a compliance assessment. Now, Section 5, community-based mental health, that's paragraphs 88 to 90. It's 3 paragraphs. And it was the first section with which the Department of Justice found substantial compliance, reported first in October 18, 2016. And it's been adjudged in substantial compliance in 2017 and 2019, and I'm revisiting it based on the evidence that the Subcommittee for People with Mental Illness has presented and the full PSEP has approved. But as I mentioned at the outset, the agreement binds only the city and not the state or county and not community care organizations. Now, providing mental health services is traditionally the responsibility of the state and the county, not the city or the police bureau. Section 5 expressly recognizes that. In fact, it codifies that it's an expectation as to non-party action. Quote, "There's limited comprehensive community mental health infrastructure which often shifts to law enforcement agencies the burden of being first responders to individuals in mental health crisis. The agreement legally binds only the city to take action. However, we expect the city's partners to help remedy the lack of community-based addiction and mental health services to Medicaid clients and uninsured area residents." Now, one of the backdrops of these 3 paragraphs is that we have a companion case. The department has a case against the state of Oregon that Adrian's in charge of, and so I'll pass it over to her so she can give you a brief overview of what's happening in that case.
Thank you, Jared. And just by way of introduction, for those of you that don't know me, I, like Jonas, have been or was involved with this case even before the beginning of its inception, when we were first doing community outreach to determine whether or not there was a case to bring at all. And I worked on the case then for 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, and the primary focus of my involvement in the city's case was revolving around persons with mental illness and the crisis intervention methods that were being utilized at the time. And that overlap came with my work with the state of Oregon, which that case had preceded the city of Portland case. So I started on that case in about 2009, and I'm still involved in that case. And so I've been doing this work for over 10 years now, and have certainly a lot of information that I can provide that may be outside the purview of this summary, and I'm happy to do that at a later time. But for now, I'm going to give you a summary of how that backdrop weaves into the paragraphs that Jared was just talking about. I do have a one-pager here that has just some of the talking points I'm going to go over. I have definitely enough for the PSEP members, and I have some extras if anyone in the public wants one. But I just provide this as a way to follow along with what I'm going to be talking about briefly. So what I'd like to start with is that this information is all publicly available, and the website that this information came from is listed there at the footnote at the bottom of the page. It's essentially a website that the Oregon Health Authority set up when we entered the agreement or entered the performance plan with them in July of 2016. Within that website, when you go to it, you will also find at the very bottom a link to the history which preceded the 2016 agreement. And I think that's important because this case started with the Oregon State Hospital under a different statutory authority. And this authority that we have involving the Oregon Health Authority is under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Title II specifically, and there's a Supreme Court case that provides basically a mandate that the ADA requires integration of services to the extent possible that's appropriate for the person's needs. And so what that means in terms that are conversational is that the idea is to try to prevent institutionalization. So to the extent that you can provide services in the community to someone, the better the outcome, the lower the cost, and the more likely that the person will be successful in the community by working with other people who do not have mental illness or whatever disability it is. So the integration mandate applies to all aspects of disabilities. This focus for the Department of Justice and our work with Oregon, the state of Oregon, was particularly regarding persons with serious and persistent mental illness. And there's a specific definition that the agreement applies to, but just to give you sort of the range, these are usually the people who have the most, as it says, the most serious level of mental illness, and it's persistent in the sense that it keeps coming back. It's treated and it may go away, but it needs to be an ongoing treatment. It's an ongoing recovery, is a way to look at it. And so that's what these array of services that you'll see. There's 10 services that the U.S. Department of Justice has worked on with the state in providing more robustly in the community in order to prevent institutionalization. That's the goal, to the extent possible. This isn't to say that everyone should be treated and that no one needs to be institutionalized, but to the extent possible, if it's appropriate for the person, to the extent possible, they should be getting one of these or more of these community services. And these are just sort of some talking points. I'm just going to highlight 4 of these areas because my goal for you today is to just understand where we're at and how it provides the backdrop for the sections that Jared just mentioned. At the time that this was all being worked on, which like I said, preceded this case with the city, we realized that there were partners that were not being addressed, and one of those partners was law enforcement. That has changed statewide, and in fact, there has been under the second topic, crisis services, there has been an extensive amount of work done in expanding mobile crisis services across the state. So, and that, I think, the city and the work that the city has done with the mobile crisis services is something that has been helpful in getting the state involved in bringing law enforcement in and helping other jurisdictions to involve crisis services with mobile crisis. But one of the things that you'll see is not specific here is walk-in facilities, respite care. There are many, many things that this agreement doesn't cover. And I think that's important to note. As Jared mentioned, just like the police and city agreement, this agreement with the state is also a floor. And it's meant to cover the entire state of Oregon, all the way from the frontier counties where you have very sparse populations, far, far away from each other, to very urban settings like this. So you're not going to see everything. This is not a panacea to fix the entire system, and it's also only focused on adults with serious and mental illness. The idea, though, was that you would have agency partners be involved, and that's what started the collaborative process with the state and working with them on the agreement. So the coordinated care organizations that weren't in existence when we first started this work in 2009 are now here. And in fact, they just entered their second round of contracts. So they had a 5-year contract that started in, let's see, it would have been like just after 2012. And then, and then it went to 2017. Then there was a gap year. There was a year where the state was working on it. Anyway, we're like a year behind, but they have the second round of contracts that just started. And I think this is key because Jared mentioned this as well. Prior to the CCOs, it was the community mental health programs, and usually contracted through the counties, that were administering crisis services. Certainly Multnomah County is unique because it's this metro tri-county area, and so there are unique issues here. But I think, Ms. Anderson pointed out in her work, this is complex. And I think it's just an important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at this agreement, the police agreement. Those are 2 tools, but now you also have other partners that aren't at the table. They weren't at this table with this agreement. They weren't at the table with the city, and they are now intricately involved. The coordinated care, and so to the extent that you need to hear from other folks that are part of the system that may not have been a part of the system before, The CCOs, just so you all are aware, and maybe some of you are, have behavioral health coordinators on the CCOs. And the work is trying to integrate that with physical care. But that's a perspective that you're not hearing right now, and how they're working with the community mental health programs and the county programs on crisis services. The other areas that I think are important to look at in wrapping around sort of the idea of how these things overlap in the backdrop are the assertive community treatment teams. These are teams that are meant to keep people in the community. These are dealing with the folks who need the most care. They need housing, they need employment, they need help getting their medicine, they need help getting to appointments. Our agreement, or the state's plan, called to have 2,000 people being served by ACT teams by this time. And right now there's 1,137 people served. So the state is, by data, and this is again all publicly available, they're behind on that goal, and how they're going to get there is sort of, what happens next. But having more people served in that way with these wraparound services and intense treatment of at least 10 providers, care providers helping, including peers helping these individuals, are going to keep them out of institutions. Another area is supported housing, and I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong number. The supported housing is the number that I gave you for having, I'm sorry, there's, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna, okay. I do want to get you correct data on that for the supported housing, but the ACT teams are important, and also then the other two areas that we're really focused on right now are the acute psychiatric care discharges and linkages to services. Those are the warm handoffs. So the plan is calling for 85% of people getting warm handoffs, so that's having a peer, having a provider help someone get out of a facility, and right now the state's at 37%, and then finally the emergency department services is the last thing, and that's the boarding in the ER. People staying in the ER too long when they should be in another treatment facility. So those are the things that I would highlight as backdrops that our partners that are not part of this here. There's one more report coming out from the independent consultant on this case. That's going to be publicly available in April, so just to keep that in mind. And then we are doing ongoing stakeholder input on this area, so I've listed my contact phone and email, and if you have additional questions, I encourage you to reach out to me.
Thank you.
And if you have recommendations to make for that part of the plan, I would encourage the committee to consider those. We found substantial compliance with those provisions a while ago, and the city has supported a non-police response to severe persistent mental illness and people in crisis. The Bureau of Emergency Communications, 911, diverts calls to the crisis line when they can and to Project Respond. The service coordination team and the behavioral health response teams try to connect people with services that have frequent police contact. That's also a helpful way that the city and the police bureau have actively supported the principles behind Section 5. Moving to Section 6, the crisis intervention, this is what I would say is the heart of the agreement. There are 25 paragraphs, and we first reported substantial compliance on May 4th, 2019 in our last report. The city, through PPB and BOEC, that's 911, they've implemented a crisis intervention approach that meets and exceeds Section 6. The approach folds in community partners, provides crisis intervention training to all patrol officers, and enhanced training for a volunteer team. That's the Memphis model that BOEC then dispatches directly to calls that have both a mental health crisis component and a substantial risk of injury. The city collects reliable data to improve their approach. That's the quality assurance measures that we've seen proactively help the model improve. The most relevant policy to that is Directive 850.20, the police response to mental health crisis. It emphasizes de-escalation and disengagement when appropriate. If the committee wants to evaluate that policy on ways it can improve, I would encourage you to do that. The Behavioral Health Unit collaborates regularly with an advisory committee that's composed of community members, service providers, and advocacy groups. The BHU oversees the Enhanced Crisis Intervention Team. It also oversees the proactive teams that follow up with people who have frequent law enforcement contacts and who need mental health or addiction services. That's the Service Coordination Team and the BHRT. And most significantly, we found that the rate of force being used against people who have mental illness or are perceived to have mental illness is way down. We have data now for a 27-month period from October 2017 through the end of 2019. In this time, PPB officers responded to over 54,000 calls that involved an actual or perceived mental health issue. Force was used in fewer than 1% of those calls, less than 400. Most of those force cases were Category 4. That Category 4 force means that it's not reasonably likely to result in physical injury. That's something like handcuffing a suspect against resistance. That was 275 of the 400 cases. That leaves about 125 cases over this 27-month period that were Category 2 and 3 level force. That includes the tasers, which was, part of our letter that brought us into this case. But overall, that's fewer than 1/5 of 1% of encounters with people with mental illness or perceived mental illness. Now, I understand that the officer-involved shootings, the level 1 force, deadly force, it's the most consequential and impactful type of force that the police officers can use. But that force is constitutional at some level, or it can be if certain justifications are met. I don't want to focus on that to the detriment of all other force, but I also don't want to delegitimize that force as being important and the focus of your inquiries, because I understand that those cases are the most tragic, consequential uses of force. But overall, we found that the enhanced crisis training, the crisis intervention training, they are having demonstrable positive effects in the way PPB interacts with people with mental illness. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for Section 7 and 8 to Jonas.
Section 7 concerns the early intervention system. Consider this risk mitigation. If Andrew's a police officer and he works for Britt this week as his sergeant, but the next week Andrew is transferred to a different precinct and Yolanda is now his sergeant, Yolanda needs to know what the risk factors are. We found in our May 2019 report that PPB has dramatically improved the times during which those new supervisors review their officers' records. Sergeants view police officers, lieutenants view sergeants, et cetera, as it goes up and down the chain. PPB is not closing as many alerts as it once did. At one point, it would close some of those alerts because they were redundant. The system is growing better, and the analysis that the EIS unit is doing is growing better. They're sending more of the alerts to the responsible unit managers for handling. Consistent with the court's approval to a changed paragraph 117, recall that there was a slight change there, PPB developed a standard operating procedure they called SOP 47 that is used by the force inspector data to identify outliers, people who aren't in the normative behavior, so outliers as compared to their peers for supervisors and groups to identify the EIS. So if this half the table were one unit, that half the table were another unit, we could compare the two peer sets and not just individuals within the peers. For each issue the force inspector identified, he recommended corrective action, which is in addition to what is required by the settlement agreement for his analysis under the SOP 47 for comparison of peers and supervisors. Likewise, Chief Outlaw directed the PPB units to develop a different risk assessment system. This is in addition to the settlement agreement. It is a precinct by precinct risk assessment tool. We've observed 2 of these risk assessment tool meetings personally, and they've shown that PPB has internalized risk mitigation as a system that's even more robust than what paragraph 117 requires. When last we did the presentation in June of 2019, we talked about Section 8 accountability being one of the few sections that was out of compliance. But we did hit on some high points. As you may recall, Constantine Severe and then Captain Bell did a joint training of IA and IPR investigators together. There should be a consistency in the system. If you're a complainant from the community or an officer within the police bureau, you should understand that whatever the outcome is, the same standards are applied, same investigative techniques, same evidence burden, and the outcome should feel fair to both the bureau members and the complainants and the witnesses who are involved. We encourage them to have a joint training so that wherever the complaint goes, the outcome should be essentially similar. However, when we reviewed the complaints themselves last year, they were not yet timely, and there were some other issues to deal with as well. Tomorrow, we'll discuss before the court Section 8, but we've submitted our compliance report for 2020. It says, as of January 10th, 2020, the city has come into substantial compliance with Section 8. Specifically, we found that the PPB and the Independent Police Review implemented long-planned changes to the accountability system, and those systems now mirror each other where appropriate. Sometimes it's not appropriate. Sometimes the IPR does things a little bit differently. The city completed extensive joint training, and IPR conducts extensive independent investigations, training newer investigators to have the same training as those who had joined before. So all those who had joined when Constantine and Captain Bell were there received the in-person training. The new investigators received the same training by video or in person. Two issues kept the city out of reaching substantial compliance last time: the timeliness and the incomplete administrative investigations that involved the city's Bureau of Human Resources. These were not force type of investigations. These were personnel type of investigations, but nonetheless, they're part of a robust accountability system. One can't merely let that portion of accountability falter and say that the system holds everybody accountable. As to the first issue, in the assessment period, the city achieved substantial compliance in the 180-day deadline for completion of accountability investigations conducted either by PPB or IPR. I'm pointing to Ross behind me here. We also assessed the quality of the investigations so that the timeliness of the investigations does not become the predominant motivator, and then we lose the efficacy of the investigations and we have no more faith in them. But PPB and IPR continue to complete investigations and reach conclusions that are supported by the evidence. The actual investigations that we look behind, even if we identified trouble and made them go back, the investigations themselves are supported by the evidence. The city continues to seek on-scene public safety statements when necessary and have witness officers provide on-scene walkthrough. As before, PPB has issued communication restriction orders. These are after critical force incidents to involved officers. And even the small outstanding issue, the city revised the city code for the small portion of the CRC members that were left out of some police review board reviews. Now the city code has caught up with the settlement agreement for just those small few incidents in which the CRC members were not included. Now they are included in all the PRBs for the force issues as required by the settlement agreement. On the second issue, that's the BHR issue, Bureau of Human Resources, those investigations that were outstanding have been completed, and we didn't just check off complete. We took a sample of those, substantively assessed them to make sure that the Police Bureau, along with Bureau of Human Resources, went through the effort of actually reaching a finding that is supported by the evidence. With that, the Bureau came into compliance with paragraph 130. Combination of looking at last year's accountability report and this year's accountability report shows that overall the accountability sections are now in substantial compliance, and that leads us to substantial compliance with most of the agreement, all of the agreement.
And one last section is Section 9, which you guys are intimately familiar with. There are 12 paragraphs, and we found the city in substantial compliance as of our January 10th or January 24th report. Two critical aspects for our compliance assessment are the city's provision of authority to you and material support to the PSEP. The PSEP plan that was passed by City Council provides meaningful authority, and the city continues to invest substantial resources and substantial logistical support for you guys' success. With respect to recommendations, you have a direct line and access to the mayor, to the PPB, and to the OEHR leadership. You are a functional conduit for community concerns. You have open meetings, open public subcommittee meetings. You've hosted functional town halls. You are self-led, and you have a self-determined agenda. We think those are valuable traits. And there's a pledge that you guys can outlive the settlement agreement. That is an improvement from the COAB model, which was under the authority of the compliance officer and would cease to exist when the settlement agreement became in substantial compliance. Now, I applaud the efforts of the steering committee and the whole committee to memorialize yourself in code, to give yourself some further insulation from political change. But we think that this gives the greatest chance of a durable remedy with respect to community engagement. Because the city endowed the PSEP with independence, we don't view compliance as turning on the work you set out to do or in fact accomplish, as long as you're doing something within the realm of police oversight, police improvement, which I think you are. We've been pleased by the committee and the subcommittee's efforts, notwithstanding room for improvement, which we do recognize, as some members of the community have mentioned as well. We thought you provided meaningful contributions to the community engagement plan, and we think your follow-up is going to be essential to the city maintaining substantial compliance. Their give and take with you. But again, if you decided not to do anything, that's not, in our view, going to take the city out of substantial compliance, so long as they facilitate your continued oversight over that community engagement plan. You provided training and policy recommendations like the wellness and procedural justice. While there's been some criticism over your guys' lack of providing metrics for measuring bias policing, we think the procedural justice recommendation goes to that. And we are confident that you guys are going to turn your attention to the bias policing and bias stops. Settlement agreement oversight. You guys have hosted town halls with both the compliance officer and the Department of Justice. You ask insightful questions. You've made recommendations about revisiting compliance issues, and we think that all falls fairly within your ambit, and you guys have acquitted yourself of that authority. You've hosted other town halls of interest to the community, including about the gun violence reduction team and facial recognition. This, I think, shows your independence and your authority. Your subcommittees are working on relevant, exciting projects, and we're particularly impressed with the youth subcommittee and their rollout of a survey that can build on itself to collect attitudes about policing from the youth members. Happy to discuss at this time. I think we went over my 20 minutes that I tried to allot for ourselves, but we're happy to take questions and comments from the PSEP and community now.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you all for your work and for your presentation. We are over time, but what we're going to do is have 20 minutes for discussion now, both PSEP and public, and then we'll take a short break before our last agenda item. PSEP members. Elliot, go ahead.
Yeah, Jonas, thank you very much for talking about outcomes. In a September meeting with the compliance officer, we were told that the settlement agreement did not include any outcomes, so I was grateful to hear you mention them. But I wonder, there's some data that, to me, suggests that there's still a long way to go, and whether you feel this data reflects success in all of these trainings. So the latest use of force data has 30% of the people who were subjected to use of force are black people in Portland, who make up 6% of the population. So we see disproportionate use of force against that group. 50% of the people who were the subject to use of force are homeless. 25% are suffering from mental illness. If we look at the numbers of arrests of homeless people in Portland, at least the 2017 data suggested half of the arrests are of homeless people. The killings, which Jared mentioned, 60% of a record number of people killed by police this year are people who are suffering from mental illness. Traffic stops, if you can look at that data, continues to be disproportionate. Even Michael Bloomberg has now rejected his own policy of stop and frisk, but it seems that the data suggests that that kind of profiling continues to go on in Portland. And finally, the Fesser incident, it's encouraging that the police and the IPR and the DOJ is looking into this now, but I'd remind everyone that this is an incident which happened a few years ago, for which there were complaints to the Oregon DOJ. There was a court case. Why has it taken until now, until a court has issued a verdict, for there to be all these investigations, for the Portland Police Bureau, whose officers were involved in this incident, to know that this had happened and to investigate on their own. So it feels like, does that data suggest that this training has accomplished everything that it hopes to accomplish? Because to me, this data suggests that there's still a long way to go.
I hear your concern, and I wouldn't want to blanket agree or disagree on behalf of Department of Justice on data that we have not seen, analyzed. The specific data to which you refer, I'd want our expert to look at.
That data is from the Portland Police Bureau, and I assume that the Portland Police Bureau and Jared has looked at all of that data.
And I've heard you mention this data before. Would it be possible for you to email the rest of the committee with where the data comes from so we can all have an idea?
It's all on the Portland Police Bureau.
If you could email everybody, I would appreciate it.
Use of
Vadim,
force
could you please
data.
stop interrupting him? Thank you, Vadim.
I hear you. I don't want to draw conclusions without being deliberate about it. I understand the concern, and I think Jared was appropriate in saying that if there are concerns about bias-based policing, it would be appropriate for the PSEP to make recommendations on that. Our 2012 letter did not reach a conclusion that there was a constitutional violation with respect to bias-based policing. It is an extremely difficult claim to prove. For a 14th Amendment violation, it would require both discriminatory impact and discriminatory intent. It's very difficult to prove. I couldn't get into what our internal deliberations are, but I can tell you that in the settlement agreement, we encourage the collection of data, and we encourage the posting of those data as well, both for stops and for force. And the force inspector's reports that he provides to the TAC and posts online are very useful for us and for the public in general. And it's an opportunity for us within the concept of this settlement agreement to hold the police bureau accountable, but in the longer term, also for the public at large to hold the police bureau and the city accountable, whatever the claim may be. I'd be pleased to discuss specific data with you if you'd show me what data on which you rely, and I had an opportunity to go and deliberate on it. I don't know what all I could say because we may not reach the same conclusion, and we may deliberate internally and come up with a different conclusion.
Thank you.
I wanted to supplement, the U.S. Attorney's Office is engaged in an active investigation to evaluate criminal wrongdoing in the Westland Police Department matter. That includes all actors. And while our investigation is ongoing, we can't comment further on that matter. As to the OIS cases of people with mental health issues, your data is correct. But I would hesitate to draw some of the conclusions that you might draw based on the obvious, the shock value of those data. There have been lives saved in the last year, including Christopher Hall, a 38-year-old black man who was apparently experiencing some sort of crisis, had a knife, grabbed a woman, took the woman by the neck with the knife, and officers were able to successfully arrest that fellow using less lethal weaponry. And to me, that is a success story where that person might end up with a more tragic consequence in years past. And I don't want to delegitimize the tragedy of every officer-involved shooting. It's tragic for the families. It's tragic for the community of people who identify with that person. I would venture that it's tragic for the police officer involved and their families to go through that process of using lethal force and the follow-on consequences. That tragedy isn't a component of the settlement agreement, and it would be, I don't want to delegitimize any individual who loses their life, but it would be impossible for us to say 2 OIS cases, 2 lethal force cases is okay, but 3 isn't. I think 1 is too many, and I think the Police Bureau would agree with me. The goal is 0, and I think it distorts the question of a compliance assessment to put quotas on numbers. Now, the other data, and we talked over coffee about that data, and I did look at it, those percentages, I think, mask the absolute numbers, which are down. And, the OIS cases, they're up one year, they're down the next, they're up the next, they're down the next. we're talking a handful of cases over the 50,000 encounters, and those encounters are increasing every year, whether that's because mental health challenges are perceived more often or methamphetamine is more available. But for officers to use under 100, uses of force, harmful use of force, and I do want to exclude that category 4 where there's no injury. Those are positive outcomes, and I don't want to say that 100's okay because I think the goal is 0, in all cases. But that data is real as well, and so the absolute numbers vis-a-vis the percentages, I think, are important to realize.
I take your point about the officer-involved shootings and the killings, because they're a small number, so you could have 60%. We're talking about three people, but I think the other data does include hundreds of people, and I would just like to know what the Department of Justice thinks in terms of what would be a sense of where we've made progress. Is 25% of use of force against people with mental illness, is that just to be expected given the nature of people with mental illness? Is half of the people who are being use of force is used against being homeless or being arrested, is that to be expected, or does that seem egregious to you? Because those data, we're not talking about a few numbers, we're talking about consistent data over time. And just to answer,
we got to move on. We got a lot of people who want to just talk. You can answer that question, but let's hear from some other committee members first, and then you can answer all at once, just to make this as efficient as we can.
I'm entertained by Elliot. I'll give you my time.
I don't think we have an expectation, and if you look at the settlement agreement, we establish processes and policies so that force is reviewed, it's reported first of all, which is important, but then it's reviewed and it's re-reviewed, and those processes we think will help ensure that the force is justified. A percentage that doesn't determine constitutionality. Bias stops doesn't determine constitutionality. It's what precedes that. Is there reasonable suspicion to stop someone? Is there probable cause to arrest someone? Is there justification for the force you used? Those are the constitutional questions, and the settlement agreement doesn't have any reference to a quota of force that's allowable or not allowable, and that's, I think, the best answer I can give you right here.
Other piece have a comment or questions for the DOJ? Sure. Go ahead, Amy.
Listening to all this, I just have to bring into perspective the enormous amount of folks that were, shall I say, released into our community from the state hospitals in the last couple of years. Somewhere in the tunes of over 700,000 people over the last few years have been released into a community that can't absorb them. And so something that I've noticed is the volume of folks on the streets is doubling and tripling, and the services are non-existent as far as housing, as far as supportive care. There is now probably a 2-year waiting list to get into residential care. So what I'm seeing is the ratio of multiplication since y'all put this report together, and the number of folks that have entered what I call the critical care system, to me, is tripled. Unity is overloaded. Every single hospital is overloaded. There is no more room anywhere in our community for anyone except maybe jail. That's kind of where most folks end up. And what I'd like to also put out there is a lot of folks in our community with severe and persistent mental illness have a hard time going to courts. So most of them have outstanding warrants, most of them have outstanding charges. A lot of them needed to go to court a year ago and haven't gone. So somehow I feel a little bit on both sides that when an officer has to investigate someone or arrest them, odds are they're probably going in for a very low-level failure to appear crime. And so the contacts are more frequent. So it appears as though there's more frequent contacts, but in reality, there's a lot of folks who are out of compliance with the criminal justice system rules. So I just want to put out there that I really appreciate all the good work you guys have done, but the years have taken its toll on our population and on our services, and everybody in Multnomah County is maxed out. And I really wonder how we're going to provide extreme care on the first point of contact when there's nowhere to refer them on the end point that they're trying so hard to preserve. So I just want to say thank you for all the great work you guys are doing, but our city is in a real crisis from the ground up. And our partners know that, everybody knows that, the judicial system knows that. In fact, I also learned that if you want to send someone to the state hospital, you have to do it within 7 days of arresting them now. There's a 7-day ruling.
Amy,
So
I'd like to just comment on one thing,
Point
and
that
you know,
out.
this case is about police response and the
Right.
city's policies, and one aspect of our Section 5 compliance, you know, even though it binds non-city entities, we found that the city and the police bureau especially, has done a good job in taking people who have low-level offenses and a mental health challenge and not putting them in the back of a police car and taking them to jail, but instead calling an ambulance and having that ambulance take them to a hospital or the Unity Center. And I know that's not a perfect solution either, but we found that that is a better outcome for people having a mental health crisis than getting in a cop car and going to jail. The ambulance in a hospital is a more appropriate place for the treatment and service they need. And that is one of the reasons we've based our Section 5 substantial compliance rating on.
Thank you. Any additional PSEP comment?
I just have one quick question. In reviewing the settlement agreements between the Justice Department and various cities around the United States, it appears there's been something like a little bit under 40 cities that have entered settlement agreements with the Justice Department, including Seattle, Los Angeles, New Orleans, and cities that are certainly larger than Portland. Is there any gold standard, not wanting to review 38 different settlement agreements where a city has achieved something that you think we should be shooting for, reduction in violence against people with mental health symptoms, racial disparities, those sort of things where perhaps we can go online, see what other cities have done, do our own research, bring that back to the table?
I think members here might acknowledge that Portland is unique, right? Every city is unique. Every city's got its different populations, and you have your different structural differences. Virgin Islands, I said it as an example to PPP before, where they told me, we're different, we're so unique. They have two different islands. They have two different sets of cultures. Still, we had a settlement agreement or consent decree with them that's lasted years. I cited for the court before the Orange County, Florida settlement agreement. It was an out-of-court agreement, did not have a court monitor. We alone monitored it. But they had a 90% reduction in the use of tasers. The goal of that settlement agreement was to consider taser use. And they had it very high and went very low. There is a similar sort of reduction here. But one can't make an apples-to-apples comparison between Portland and any other city. There's a constitutional right that we need to remedy. It's the Fourth Amendment right to be free from unwarranted search and seizure. So we don't want unconstitutional use of force. And as Jared spoke of when he last responded to Elliot's question, each individual use of force we assess, is it reasonable? Is the threat severity and resistance sufficient to constitutionally justify, and in an objectively reasonable sense, that use of force? That's the standard. The standard is not a relative comparison to other cities, because the other cities have different issues. The remedies, as you read this one, and you read New Orleans, and you read the older LA consent decree, you may see some similarities, but they're different cities. So I encourage you not to measure yourselves by, are we as good as, or better than, or worse than city X, Y, or Z, but rather, is this settlement agreement achieving constitutional policing? That's the goal.
Thank you. Any?
While discussing other settlement agreements, Jared and I have a discussion ongoing about paragraph 8990. Might I suggest in the future you don't put that in? Because if I was to agree to that or something similar to that as an individual, and sign that like the city signed it, I would be in trouble because I couldn't get that done. And so maybe you guys need to work that out in the future.
The point's well taken, Patrick. And so you know, a consent decree, if it binds a non-party, it can't be entered. And so that's why we wrote it as an expectation. The court asked that question to the United States and all the parties before it decided the settlement agreement on its face was fair, adequate, and reasonable. And our response was, we wrote this as an expectation because it does not bind the city. And I understand the confusion of it, and if I were writing it fresh,
Thank you. I'm just saying, in the future, maybe you don't put that in.
Fair
Since we're
point.
talking about different other settlement agreements.
And if I could, excuse me, just add one note to that, and I mentioned this briefly in my comments about where we're at with the other case, but it's ideal to look at what the work was that the city could do in this situation, which is reaching out to their system partners and encouraging them to be involved. And so that's the question, I think, is what has the city done to reach out to those partners to get them involved? And just from the years that I was on the case, there was a lot of progress in that area. In fact, the last status update that I was involved with was like October of 2016, I believe. And even then, we were finding the city was working really hard to engage those system partners through the behavioral health unit, through its work with Cascadia, through its work with Project Respond. And so I think one of the questions, the concerns what I'm hearing, and it's a common concern, is what is the state doing to help the other system partners, right? Like the CCOs. And that's why I encourage you all to the extent that this is still a frustrating topic, it may be helpful to try to reach out to those other system partners and be able to, for them to know, I think the city hears you, we hear you, I hear you at least. It's frustrating because they're not signers on the agreement. So the question is, what did the signers do to try to meet that aspiration? And for you then, as your longevity of the work you're doing is, okay, what are those other system partners doing, right? You to the extent that you're gonna be doing this work beyond the agreement, there's not gonna be an agreement if you're working beyond the agreement, right? And so then it's looking for you to see who else can be involved in our community to help us answer these problems. And to that, I would encourage you to take a look at the CCOs and their behavioral health directors, and the county mental health programs and the crisis programs.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to the public now. We only have 5 minutes, so if you have comments or questions, make them known, and the DOJ can follow up after tonight. Yeah, please.
Recently, I got an email, and I don't remember if it was federal or if it was state, but they said they're going to give a cash infusion, and they were thinking of starting a new program. So I told them I didn't think a new program would work. I thought the regular programs that are here would probably be the best bet. The only place that I did not mention was Pilot Project. And it's supposed to be, the money is supposed to be geared towards the veterans, but it's for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
The question I have is about, I guess, training. And in looking at 2019, let's say, in the beginning of this year as well, has there been any focus on cases, use of force, deadly force, that have turned out well with someone not ending up dead versus a case where someone has ended up dead? And I look specifically at the December case where the individual was talked down, and then a few weeks later, pretty immediately, same individual, same situation, shot and killed just like that. And so when I see that, I wonder what lessons are being learned from the successful cases where someone didn't die versus the ones where they did. Because it seems to me there must be some training here that would be relevant. And I can't get any answer from the PPB when I asked that question about to what depth are the cases looked at, compared? Is it, a difference in training? Is it a difference in officer? What is it that goes to a successful outcome and one that isn't? And when you look at the same person with the same behavior and you get a successful outcome and then you get a dead person, what is it?
Sure. Sorry, Dan. Very quickly, two things. One is there's after-action reviews of those trainings, such that the police review board, the after-action review, and ultimately even the city's contract with the OIR will look at the actual case study. But in training specifically, it is scenario-based, so it won't be a case study of what happened last year, but in the 2020 in-service training, they do room clearances, and the decision is, do you go in or do you not go in? Because if you go in, you might have to engage, and you might end up in a force event. If you don't go in, you might have a risk of something bad happening. And that is part of the training for 2020, that decision-making to not engage in a room entry.
And I would just emphasize that some of those positive outcomes, the behavioral health unit advertises or, mentions, sings the success stories. And I think there is a place to evaluate what went right and why it went right. I think that might be easier for the police bureau to talk about in some respects. So I think that's something for the committee to consider a recommendation on. Dissecting the anatomy of a positive interaction, a de-escalation of the month award, something like that. I mean, it's not a compliance issue, but it's a good idea.
So again, I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and we did an analysis of both the compliance officer and the DOJ's agreement. I sent this to you, and you should all have copies of it. We did this on February 12, and at that time we said, it's notable that only 4 of the original members of PCCEP are still remaining on the committee, but now there are only 2 of those original members on the PCCEP. This is just 2 weeks later, less than. So this kind of discussion, I got 2 metaphors for you. One reminds me, what if the investigation had said there weren't enough restrooms in a jail, and the jail built more restrooms, but then the inmates weren't allowed to use them? They said, well, that wasn't part of the outcomes. We just said you had to build more restrooms. They don't have to use them. So that's basically what I'm hearing tonight. It's nice that there was a DOJ acknowledged that there should be 0 shootings, but we've said many times that when you go to a restaurant and you find out that somebody died after eating their food, one time after that happens, they should really not have any more deaths after that. So we're having too many deaths, and that's going on. We also were told in a report by one of the entities, I can't remember which one, that the PPB doesn't want to use training on actual cases because they don't want to embarrass the officers that were involved in those cases. So I'd be very surprised if the Coben-Henriksen case gets used for a training purpose. They referred to IPR's independent investigations. IPR, as you know, still has to ask the PPB to compel officers to testify to them. The Citizen Review Committee chair resigned at the beginning of the month out of frustration because of the standard of review, which is written in the DOJ agreement, but is a floor, not a ceiling, but the city won't change it. So there are a lot of things that are not successful around this agreement. And the BHU Advisory Committee does not hold open meetings after years of people asking for that to happen. And finally, just you made reference to the Fesser case. I'm really hoping if the IPR is investigating it, that the person who is implicated as having been at the Bureau of Labor and Industries who didn't investigate the case is not the one doing that investigation. Thank you.
I just want to respond quickly about the PSEP and the membership. Like, we really appreciate your service and understand that some people have other things going on in their life and need to withdraw their volunteer service. Some people move, some people go to college, some people just get fed up with the work. That to us, the compliance issue is how the city responds, whether it fills your vacancies in a timely fashion, in a deliberate fashion, in a way that gives you guys some authority and control. And to me, the fact that 2 of you have stuck around longer than, 18 months, I salute you for doing that. I encourage you all to stay. I haven't seen that impact your work progress, and so I don't view that as a compliance issue.
Just for a point of clarity, Yolanda and I went through the training. We were seated later, but we've been here as long as the other 2. Just everybody.
for
I
the notice.
do want to point out that I'd be happy to discuss with anybody why I'm leaving. Thank you.
Additional public comment?
I'm Peter Parks. I'm also with Portland Cop Watch. I just like to mention that as a community member, I work with a lot of people who are in the community, particularly homeless people. And what we want are outcomes. And this settlement agreement is very limited in what it covers. It does not demand outcomes, actually. It demands compliance with a certain set of suggested things. I'm particularly liked what Elliot Young said about the disproportionate data showing treatment of different parts of our community, black people, homeless people, mental illness, and those are things that the community notices. We notice those things, and we expect that to change. And that could change a lot quicker than it has been. And also, I'd like to uphold what Amy Anderson said about there not being enough services for people on the street, that the number of people who are on the street are just going up and up and up, and they have nowhere to go. They're not being given the kind of treatment they need. And I do understand that the settlement agreement does not cover that, but as a community member, that's what we want. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you. We are going to take a 10-minute break before our final agenda item. We will reconvene at 7:50. Thank you.
That data is all on the
All right, everybody, we're going to reconvene. So take your seats for the final act of the night. Thank you. Yeah, luckily our city club board meetings are early in the morning, which might not work for other people, but if you're up anyway, it works.
Actually, joining the board of ERCO.
Okay.
So,
cool.
And I need to figure out what drops out at that point in time. Not PSAP, I don't think, at this point, but something.
Is our next committee meeting, I'm trying to think, you sure that's in town? No, is that the, that's the 11th, isn't it?
Talking about settlement agreement? Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna go put that in my calendar. So 4 o'clock?
4:30.
4:30, okay.
Let's just say we have this idea and we want to, solve this perception based off of already existing data. Do we then
Do any of you know what the Wi-Fi is here? Password?
I asked Theo.
All right, folks, we got to get started.
So your survey?
We did a while ago. But David Douglas is
Hi, Ann. I did. Did you send it? I think you sent it to everybody in the committee. Yeah. I just didn't know what. Yes. I would really appreciate that. Great. Great. Thank you. Okay, we are starting our discussion of PSEP's court statement. This is for tomorrow morning's hearing. I'm going to turn it over to Vadim to talk through the document that he drafted about our assessment that could be submitted to the court. Vadim.
Okay, so I'll start off with just a brief background on Section 9. In mid-2018, there was a settlement amendment to the settlement agreement about bringing up PSEP as the engagement entity within the settlement agreement once COAB had dispersed. And then this was followed up in October of 2018, which was, I believe, even before the first PSEP meeting before the court. And so at that point in time, there was still some issues about training and what kind of work PSEP was going to be able to partake and what that would look like. At that point in time, there was both input from the Albina Ministerial Alliance, Coalition for Justice, as well as the MHA on the duties of PSEP and what that would mean in the future. And then in July, I believe, of 2019, in June of 2019, the AMA testified as to the stability of PSEP members' attendance, engagement by City Council, and the court agreed to postpone whether or not to accept the amendments to the settlement agreement, Section 9, for a period of 6 months, which brings us to where we are right now. So during tomorrow's hearing, there will be testimony as to whether there is substantial compliance with Section 9, the part of the settlement agreement that established PSEP. And so to that end, I addressed the different paragraphs involved in Section 9 and propose findings on those paragraphs. Part of this was discussed during the Department of Justice's earlier encapsulation of the whole settlement agreement. I'll go a little bit more depth in it here, and I say a little bit because we are running short on time here, so I'll try to condense as much as possible. Keeping in mind here that when I use terms such as substantial compliance, it is relating to what the settlement agreement determined was substantial compliance, which is the achievement, substantial compliance that I'm quoting, is achieved if any violation of the agreements are minor or occasional and are not systemic. So I'll begin with paragraph 141 of the settlement agreement, section 9, which is to leverage ideas, talent, experience, and expertise of the community of the city in consultation with DOJ to establish PSEP, basically. And so PSEP was established in August of 2017 with the membership being available September 11, 2018. Membership has been sufficient through that time, and there have been meetings of PSEP on a regular basis since October of 2018. Because that section was only, that paragraph was only relating to the establishment of PSEP, I propose that there is substantial compliance as PSEP has been established, and we do meet on a regular basis and have a quorum at every meeting. Paragraph 142, PSEP shall be authorized to solicit information from the community about PPP's performance, and I'm summarizing here a little bit. It says more than that, but for the sake of time. To make recommendations to the police chief, commissioner, and director of Office of Equity and Human Rights, advise the chief and the police commissioner on strategies to improve community relations, contribute to the development and implementation of a community engagement plan, receive public comments and concerns. And so PSEP has met and represents a broad spectrum of the community. PSEP members at all times encourage public comment, both in the monthly meetings as well as in the subcommittee meetings. And PSEP members, let me back up a little bit. PSEP members have made recommendations based on community feedback. Many of these recommendations were discussed today by Robert King. We do take some responsibility in the fact that these recommendations, some of them did not go before the chief of police as well as the commissioner of police until fairly recently. There was an oversight. Most of those recommendations made their way through and have been addressed. Some updates have been provided. There's still a couple recommendations that need further vetting. So that has been an imperfect process, but I think we're on the right track right now once we understood where the pitfalls were in that process. PSEP did participate in the development of the community engagement plan. We made recommendations to the Police Bureau, and those recommendations were accepted by the Police Bureau in whole. We do have work to do in the future to make sure that we monitor the engagement plan, provide further feedback to the Police Bureau. And in that respect, it is important that we do have continuity. So when people do mention the membership and the fact that we have maybe 2 members from the original subset of the PSEP that was established, it is important to have that continuity so that we know what we've done, what are the expectations, what are the plans going forward. And we have met in planning sessions to kind of understand how to go forward, how to make sure that the Police Bureau is held accountable, how to keep track of our recommendations and to follow up on those recommendations. And the engagement plan is, of course, the most important so far, as that is certainly an aspect of the settlement agreement. With respect to that particular paragraph, once again, I find that there is substantial compliance. We have received, We do interact both in the meetings of the full committee and the subcommittee with senior level people from the Police Bureau. And we have support from the mayor's office with respect to the recommendations that we provide. And for these and the other reasons listed in the full recommendation, I do recommend a substantial compliance for paragraph 142. Paragraph 143, PSEP's membership will come from a reasonably broad spectrum of the community. PSEP members shall not have an actual or perceived conflict of interest with the city of Portland. I addressed this earlier, I kind of skipped a paragraph, but we strive, every one of us, in vetting future members of PSEP as well as internally to represent a broad spectrum of the community. I hope you agree that we're doing at least an adequate job, and I think we're doing a very good job of doing that. And we certainly listen to various members of the community, both in the main meeting and also in our subcommittee meetings. When we go through the training, once we're asked to be on the committee, we are provided training by the city on conflicts of interest and what that means. The city attorney does advise us on conflicts of interest, and we're supposed to acknowledge any conflicts that we may have. So the training is there. And so for those reasons, I once again recommend that we find that there's substantial compliance with paragraph 143. Paragraph 144, the city shall provide administrative support so that PSEP can perform the duties and responsibilities identified in this agreement. We have 2 full-time employees that provide administrative support, and we also have other city employees that attend our meetings and provide ancillary support as needed. We have been able to reach out to various entities within the city to gain additional support, including the attorney's office when we've had questions about certain legal aspects of our organization. I do acknowledge and thank Theo and Claudia, who are here today, who are our main line of support, and Judith Mowry, who is here today as well, who provides counsel to us on a regular basis. So in that respect, I once again recommend that we find that there's substantial compliance with paragraph 144. Paragraph 145, to ensure constitutional policing, to closely interact with the community to resolve neighborhood problems and to increase community confidence, PPB shall work with the city resources knowledgeable about public outreach process and the PSEP to improve its engagement with the community. So PPB has formed and staffed the Office of Community Engagement. The office and PPB have worked with the city and PSEP to improve engagement with the community, and PSEP is tasked with regularly reviewing and improving PPB's efforts under the Community Engagement Plan. PSEP members were before City Council when the Community Engagement Plan was announced and approved by City Council, and we provided feedback on it and promised to, in the future, review the engagement plan and the needs of the community with respect to that plan. As was mentioned earlier, it is heartening to us that the mayor has said that PSEP will continue even after the settlement agreement is approved and the settlement agreement comes to an end, if that is the eventuality. I do think that this is a multi-year task. This is not something that can be completed in a few months or even a year or even 2 years. There's obviously a lot in the community to heal, a lot of issues that we're hearing that need to be addressed, and a lot of honest distrust between various segments of the community and the police bureau. That distrust leads from incidents that have happened over a long course of time. And certainly there needs to be a continuing engagement between the police bureau and the community that will last longer than a year if the Justice Department finds that there's substantial compliance and the settlement agreement clock starts ticking. So with respect to the mayor and his word that we will continue past that year, I take him at that word. And I think that there will be more work to do for the people that are sitting here and our successors. But for what we have done right now, I do think that the city is in substantial compliance, or that is a recommendation I'm making. Paragraph 146, within 120 days of the effective date of the amendments to the agreement, the city will conduct another reliable, comprehensive, and representative survey of members of the Portland community regarding their experiences with PPB's community outreach efforts and accountability efforts. That survey was conducted on the May of 2019 with feedback from PSEP, and it was discussed during the July 2019 PSEP meeting. So my recommendation for this paragraph is also substantial compliance. Paragraph 147, PPB shall continue to collect appropriate demographic data for each precinct. With input from PSEP to develop outreach policing programs specifically tailored to the residents and the precincts. PPB has provided demographic data to PSEP on December 2018 and March 2019. PSEP members have requested that data be collected in a more relevant way for demographic groups. Obviously, there's a lot of data if you go to the Portland Police website, as well as with the data that was presented here is difficult for members to analyze that data on their own, and we have made requests for more regular data as well as broken down in ways that is easier for us to understand, assimilate, and to discuss with the community. We are waiting for PPB to respond with that kind of data as needed. That being said, the conversations are ongoing. The data was presented in whole, and it is something that we will be working with PPB in order to provide the data that members need. So as it currently stands, I'm recommending substantial compliance with that paragraph. Paragraph 148, PPB shall continue to require that officers document appropriate demographic data regarding the subjects of police encounters, including race, age, sex, and perceived mental health status of the subjects, and shall provide such information to the PSEP and make such information publicly available to contribute to the analysis of community concerns. PPB has assured us that this data is being collected as required. PPB has informed PSEP that such data is available on public portals and in yearly reports. I do note that PSEP members have reported that their request for data that is specific and drills down into the vast information as noted earlier. In that respect, PPB has not been as responsive as needed. PSEP believes that to be in full compliance with paragraph, PPB data analysis should work with the PSEP to create specific reports which could inform PSEP's community efforts. So in that respect, once again, data is very important. I believe Commissioner Hardesty certainly mentions that she's very data-driven, and really that's the basis of our work here. And one of the reasons why I asked earlier about where certain numbers are coming from, for us to be able to speak the same language in a way, we have to be able to have the same data. And so PSEP will continue to request the data that's necessary in order for us to be able to have those conversations. Certainly PPB has been open to those requests, and so I likewise recommend that there is substantial compliance for that paragraph. Paragraph 149, the compliance officer, PPB, and DOJ will jointly develop metrics to evaluate community engagement and outreach, and PSEP will review those metrics. The community officer, the COCL, PPB, and DOJ have developed those metrics and evaluate community engagement and outreach. Those metrics were addressed in the community engagement plan, and the community engagement plan was adopted by the city. Certainly, we will continue to monitor those metrics as we proposed earlier on and ascertain whether there's need for any additional metrics. The community engagement plan, I believe, is a living entity that will evolve over time. But for what we've asked so far and what the city has provided and the Police Bureau have provided, likewise, I recommend a substantial compliance with this paragraph. Paragraph 150, annually PPB shall issue a publicly available PPB annual report, which shall include a summary of its problem-solving community policing activities. There's quite a few other caveats there, including meeting with the public on a regular basis to discuss those reports. So in 2018, PPB released its annual report, and again in July of 2019. The report was discussed during a PSEP meeting in July of 2019. PSEP made recommendations about that report, which we heard today was fully accepted by the Portland Police Bureau. PPB held meetings in each of the precincts about it. One of the issues that has been brought up over time is that there was not enough information given to the community about those meetings to be able to attend and provide feedback in time. That is something we'll be cognizant of in the future as the reports come out and as future meetings happen. That being said, for the time being, those meetings were held, and the PSEP was able to make recommendations on the annual reports. And then when the next report comes out, we'll see to what extent those recommendations have made a difference and what else can be improved. For what has happened up until now and the data that has been provided in discussions that have happened, I believe there is substantial compliance, and that's my recommendation for 150. Paragraph 151. PSEP shall meet as needed to accomplish their objectives set forth in PSEP plan. PSEP shall hold regular town hall meetings, which will be open to the public. To the extent PSEP meetings are subject to the Open Public Meetings Law or similar regulatory or statutory requirements, the city shall be responsible to give advice necessary to the PSEP to ensure compliance with those laws and agrees to represent PSEP in any challenges. As briefly mentioned earlier, PSEP has met regularly. We have adhered to open meetings laws. Our meetings are televised. Our subcommittees likewise are open to the public. There has been some comment that I've read recently about our retreats and whether those are open to the public. In our retreats, we do try to, in some ways, discuss internally how we handle situations. We do not make policy during those retreats. We do try to figure out how to best work together in order to accomplish the mission that PSEP has. I myself am not sure if those meetings would have as much value if they were open to the public as a whole to observe. That is something that I think we should entertain over time. There's a balance there between people's ability to speak freely and openly about what they feel is working and not working. And we do try, as I mentioned, our best to not discuss any policy or programmatic issues during our individual retreats. That being said, we will take that into consideration in future retreats. But based on the criteria that is in paragraph 151 about our meetings and being open to the public, I do believe that there is substantial compliance. Paragraph 152, the city shall provide PSEP members with appropriate training necessary to comply with the requirements of city and state law. The city does provide training for us. It is a fairly thorough training, both some of the similar training that's provided to other advisory bodies to the city, ethics training, diversity training, and the city is very much involved, including having the attorney's office provide training. We also have organizations, including the AMA, that has provided training on the background of the settlement agreement. So it is a very robust and certainly time-consuming training that I think a lot of us benefited from in order to understand what led us to where we are here. I do think that the new members are currently going through that training, and certainly the 2 additional members will be able to experience that. It is definitely an eye-opener. I realized quite a bit that when I joined the organization I didn't fully know, and I appreciate all the people that participated in the training and gave us information with respect to that, and I hope we'll continue to do that. But based on paragraph 152 and the requirements therein, The amicus groups were present for the training. The city provided training to us, and I do recommend that there's substantial compliance. Shall we open it to the membership?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Vadim. It's a lot of work went into this, so I appreciate it. PSEP comments and questions. Elliot?
Yeah, thank you, Vadim. There is a lot of work that went into this. On February 11th, I circulated to the PSEP members an amendment I wanted to add in subsequent discussions or email conversations. Andrew edited it, and so I'm going to read what this addition would be. And
I thought I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do need to bring this out. I thought the process here was we were going to vote on the full thing and then vote on the amendments separate.
Well, as the person bringing the amendment, I would like this amendment to be considered as part of the full thing, and we could debate and discuss and vote, and people could vote however they want. But if you allow me to explain the reasoning.
Well, there is an amendment. I think we need to address one thing at a time. If we start having a bunch of amendments all at the same time, or even one amendment at the same time, this is not going to
What's the other
be an
amendment?
orderly manner.
I think that's a reasonable concern. I think the best way to go about this, Elliot, is to talk about what the amendment is. In other words, what the content is. And then if people agree with the content of what you're proposing, then we can talk about the best vehicle for that content.
Well, as someone proposing the amendment, this was circulated to everyone February 11th, so everyone has seen it. The content is to say that while I agree we are in substantial compliance if you go paragraph by paragraph, there is a forest and trees issue here, and I think that there needs to be a statement that speaks about the issues of continuing high rate use of force incidents against people identified with mental illness, other issues related to what one could construe as unconstitutional policing, including the disproportionate stops of black pedestrians and drivers. And so this statement would, and I could read it. Why don't I read it for the public, since it was not distributed, I'm not sure why, to the public. In conclusion, while we believe that the city is in substantial compliance with Section 9, we also believe that PSEP remains a work in progress with the need for continued efforts to build on our foundation of trust by expanding outreach to all corners of our city. We find that there is still a long way to go to fulfill the spirit of the agreement, in particular the requirement, quote, that the city and PPB put in place more effective systems of oversight and self-correction that will identify and correct problems before they develop into patterns or practices of unconstitutional conduct or erode community trust. That's from the settlement agreement. Given the continued high rate of police killings of people suffering mental health crises, the high rate of use of force incidents against people identified as mentally ill and homeless, and the disproportionate stops of black pedestrians and drivers, we conclude that there are not adequate measures in place to correct problems that have existed in Portland for more than a decade. While we applaud the efforts of the PPB to implement new training programs to address these issues, if the same patterns and practice of unconstitutional conduct persists year after year, then we cannot conclude that the systems of oversight are, in fact, working. We recognize that we stand on the shoulders of countless individuals and organizations who have been fighting for more just and equitable policing in Portland for generations, including several that are party of this very lawsuit. It is our goal and indeed mission to do our part to acknowledge the wrongs of the past, improve PPB policy and practice, and rebuild trust between the police and the community they serve. We are honored to be part of this effort and thank the city and our fellow Portlanders for their support.
And that is actually two separate amendments, one made by, was it you, Andrew? One made by Andrew and one made by Elliot. So the part with Elliot's amendment was sandwiched between two of Andrew's amendments. So that's where I'm saying this is going to be a little difficult to do.
Well, what I did was, as you know, was in the process of editing, we bring together the amendments, and so Andrews was actually taking my amendment and summarizing it, and I thought it needed this other thing. This is my amendment as it stands. I propose this to PSEP to discuss and debate to accept or not accept.
On the content that Elliot put forth, does anyone have comments, questions, thoughts on whether it should be included in our presentation tomorrow?
So is this like a forward? Would it go above the existing statements that we have here?
It's constructed as a conclusion.
Conclusion.
Right now. So it's in conclusion.
And so if I'll open it for other comments as well after this. I don't mean to be the sole speaker here but my concern is that the middle part there about unconstitutional killings and so on is something that needs to be vetted. Definitely, it's something that is part of the whole settlement agreement as a whole. It has absolutely nothing to do with the PSEP Section 9 amendment. The judge will want to know whether PSEP shall be part of the settlement agreement permanently, and that is what I'm trying to address here. And I know that there's going to be various opinions which need to be discussed and vetted over the course of the next year as the settlement agreement continues, or perhaps now. There's certainly a lot of information there. It was discussed at length by the Justice Department as to what those numbers may mean and whether there are adequate measures in place and whether the settlement agreement as a whole is in substantial compliance or not. My main concern here is not the verbiage or the issues that are brought up, is that it really has nothing to do with Section 9, which is an integral part for this organization to function after tomorrow.
I'm in agreement with that.
Amy and Patrick?
If I remember right, we
Lock you.
discussed at great lengths at the steering committee how we wanted to present the PSEP's model of discussion, and then how if an individual wanted to separately go testify on their thought process, they would produce then their document on their amendment on what they wanted to bring before the judge. Was I not correct when I heard that at the
No, that's right.
steering
We are
committee?
seeking consensus. That's right. We want to speak with one voice. Of course, all of us as citizens are free to attend the court hearing tomorrow and speak our piece.
Yeah, but I'm referring to what Vadim was saying, that we were going to centralize on one solid document, and then if people had additional input, they would provide it separately during the course of that hearing. That was kind of my understanding, but
That's right. We're seeking one
yeah,
committee statement.
right.
Patrick?
Yeah, I wasn't brought into this document until well late into the process. So the steering committee wrote it, and then we were just like accidentally made aware of it. So I have a couple questions. Why did it only discuss item 9 or section 9 instead of the whole of the agreement, which we are responsible for?
Because the hearing tomorrow is going to be about Section 9 and not the whole agreement. The whole agreement has been discussed before by the Justice Department, and there's certain parts have been recommended to be in substantial compliance or not. I did not set forth to discuss the whole agreement. When I was at the steering committee 2 months ago, we discussed just Section 9, and that's what I proposed. And anybody is free to propose anything else, which is my recommendation. If there's other things that you want, please put them forth in another document. What I'm putting forth is just a piece about Section 9, which is what the judge is going to decide tomorrow.
Okay, so Elliot could bring forth his, and we could vote as that as part of the document then, because we're not discussing anything else other than 9 besides in Elliot's mention. And then also in 142, you mentioned the PSEP has met with the chief of police and police commissioner, which is the mayor, to discuss strategies to improve community relations. I'm sorry, I'm bad with big words. Was that just specifically at our public meetings, or was that also the private meetings that the steering committee held with the chief of police and the mayor?
I can't speak to that. I haven't met with the police chief or the mayor in public or otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
To be clear, the chief both Chief Outlaw and Chief Resch have come to our full.
So it's the public meetings, or is it the private meetings you're talking about in that particular paragraph?
So,
Oh,
to be clear.
I was talking about the public meetings.
Okay, because it's kind of confusing there.
Lakiana has a comment. Lakiana, go right ahead. Lakiana, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I started talking and I was still on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm going to start with just the technical aspects of. I'm just going to speak on what Elliot wrote, and starting with the technical aspects of that. Just two small changes. I agree with Vadim about the unconstitutional piece. I like the statement overall, but I feel like we need some more stuff to look at to kind of validate that. So, Elliot, I would consider changing that word in there. And then you also, somewhere in there, use the word self-correction, which I think is part of the problem when you have an institution that's trying to self-correct itself. And so I would also consider changing that language around there to, that's why we have PSEP and other, apparatuses like it, because of self-correction sometimes isn't enough. So consider both of those. Agree with Patrick about the idea of why we're only commenting on section 9, but also understand where, Vadim, you're coming from in there about how you shaped this. So my suggestion is this. I think it can go right in there. Elliot's amendment can go right in there with what you've already written. I think as we're bringing up this thing about substantial compliance and people wanting to know and have been asking, the public has been asking what PSEP stance is, I think it fits in there with it. At the same time, if you feel strongly that you wrote this specifically for section 9 and it was kind of written because it was like we weren't sure how everybody felt on it, then we could keep it as is and you could vote on Elliot's as an additional statement. So if you feel like, I crafted this, I want to keep it I'm just wrote something about section 9 and I don't want to have Elliot's thing in there, and then we can vote on them independently. I think they could go together as one statement. Amy, I know you had said that you felt like we're supposed to speak as one voice, and this is part of that process to speak as one voice and bringing this up in there. So I don't see them as dueling ideas. I think I see them as speaking on the same topic at different points of it. So I think there's two ways you can go about doing it. I think that it would need to be wordsmithed just a little bit. So I would recommend that the committee not get too hung up on like all the little word details. I think that you vote on it as it looks now, but knowing that we might need to change some corrections, I think the word unconstitutional and some other things could probably be fixed up in there, and that's my thoughts on it.
So, Lakiana, I accept that as a friendly amendment, and I would just change unconstitutional in the last line to questionable conduct. In terms of self-correction, that's a quote from the settlement agreement, so I can't change a quote, but I take your point.
I also wanted to echo what Vadim was talking about in regards to the relevance of some of the details that Elliot was bringing up, but I also do want to recognize there are important aspects when we're talking about the continuation and sustainability of of PSEP as an entity. It is important to recognize that the work is never ending, and so I think there needs to be some sort of recognition of that, whether or not the language that Elliot has presented right now is the language we should use if we're speaking from one voice. That's a different conversation, but I think it's not necessarily relevant, the details of what is being, explained there from Elliot's amendment.
And I just want to stress that we have 1 year to make any kind of statements about the settlement agreement as a whole before, before the settlement agreement evaporates. This particular language has so much in there that needs to be discussed with the Justice Department, with the public, with the people on this committee. At the very least, I would propose 2 separate documents voted on today. What I would really propose is voting on just the very narrow Section 9 as to whether we are doing the job we are tasked to do, and then having a discussion next month or in the next couple of months with whether the agreement as a whole is meeting standards. You know, I think that is very important, and I think to have, 3-4 sentences basically saying that it's not does a disservice to the analysis that has to take place.
I would just say, in response to that for me, I would not vote in favor of the statement with just saying everything's in substantial compliance, because that's missing the elephant in the room. And that is what the conclusion is about, is the elephant in the room. I'm not denying that each paragraph that you went through is in substantial compliance. I'm raising the broader point, which I understand you think is a separable issue. In my mind, my ethics, the PSEP as representing the community, it would do a disservice to my understanding of representing that community to not say that as part of saying the city is in substantial compliance with Section 9. But I think we should just vote on it. As I understand, I know we don't run by Robert's Rules of Orders, but if an amendment has been made and proposed, it's been discussed, I think we could just vote on it. If it fails, then it fails.
Just a point of clarification. So tomorrow, the statement is because that's what's in question is Section 9.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So how do you want to handle this vote on the broader statement first and then the amendment, or I'm not sure how we're doing this now.
Yeah, I think, Amy, do you have one more comment?
I need a little more clarification on how this amendment fits into our showing that the PSEP is in compliance as we are today. I guess I'm a little confused how this connects the two together.
Well, the statement says that the city is in substantial compliance with Section 9. It raises questions on the overall spirit of the agreement, as well as questions which are not in Section 9 paragraph by paragraph. And I think raising those questions at the same time as we say Section 9 is in substantial compliance, those two things are not in contradiction, in my mind.
I would also like to point out that that I feel we should vote first on Elliott's amendment as part of it, because if that fails, I have another suggestion.
Lakiani, you have one more comment before we move the agenda here?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I just disagree with folks that are saying that Elliott's statement does not have to do with tomorrow's hearing. Yes, it's on Section 9, but it's not like it's a totally irrelevant part of the conversation. And just because they're specifically looking at Section 9 does not mean it does not have an impact on the overall substantial compliance. So it's a 100% irrelevant statement at any time, and especially considering how few opportunities we have to be before the judge. That idea that it has no place tomorrow does not hold weight in my opinion.
Okay. We are over time anyway, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to vote on the content of Elliott's amendment. Then, depending on the outcome of that, we need to take public comment on the full substance. Okay, let's take public comment on the amendment.
Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. To save time, I'm going to make comments about the whole thing. I think you should add the amendment. The hearing is technically, yes, about fairness, adequacy, and reasonableness of the section that created your group, but nobody knew that this status conference was also going to include findings by both bodies that found everything in substantial compliance. That was not something that was expected when they set up the status conference. So to ignore that, as Mr. Drury just said, is to ignore your very few chances that you have to talk to Judge Simon. I think it would be very important for you to say something about the overall gist of what's going on. So we support the amendment. I gave you examples last time of how I think that your section is not in substantial compliance, and of course, this part's not in the agreement itself, but the 60 days the city has to reply to you, they didn't even address the PPA contract recommendations from 60 days ago as of today, and there was no promise to. They just said that the mayor has those forwarded to him. So there's no response from that. So, you know, you're already starting to get this treatment that the COAB got with no responses to your recommendations, and you gotta be really firm to make sure that they get back to you. The future of the PCCP after the end of the settlement agreement is something I wish you would also have time to put into your agreement, but we're gonna raise the question with the judge, who's gonna do I said this last month, who's gonna do the investigations that the DOJ and the COCL have been doing? You should consider asking for a staff person to help you do those investigations, doing those deep dives now, so that the city has time to set up a job description and put out a job so that a year from now, you already have a new staff person that can do those things for you. So think about maybe raising that with the judge too. Maybe if he asks you a question, you can answer to. There are several things that, again, that you're supposed to be in substantial compliance about. I didn't even realize you said you received precinct data twice from the Bureau. I don't remember that happening or just being discussed at these meetings. The annual reports, I already mentioned how inadequate the public hearings on those were, and the mayor won't take public comment, and there's only been one council hearing. In 5 years, they've had a chance to do those annual reports, one council hearing. That's not substantial. That's minimal compliance, okay? And for your own group, and again, this is also in your founding document and not in the agreement, but you're supposed to be putting out quarterly reports, and I only saw in the DOJ's report that only 2 came out last year. I don't know what happened to the other 2. So we are very concerned about being too generous about substantial compliance in all, and we really encourage you to add that amendment so that the community can trust that you recognize there are still problems to be solved. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Mr. Barnett.
Mr. Barnett from Northeast Portland, longtime resident and an activist in social justice, and for almost all that time, over 40-something years, and seen different iterations of various community groups that attempted to address the problems that we have with the local government, and very, just say mixed bag results, but a lot of us in the community had real high hopes for this particular body, since it was an outcome of a problem that was raised by the community. This didn't come out of the DOJ, it didn't come out of some scientists from Chicago, it came right out of the community. So we had a lot of high hopes that now we have some kind of a stature to make sure that there was a real accounting, you know, back to the community. You're supposed to really, really represent the community, and I'm not questioning whether you have or haven't. What I'm saying is, at this juncture, to give the DOJ and this so-called scientific research a pass while people are still being killed, African Americans are still being killed. You use statistics back and forth and say, on one hand, you're saying, and look, it's only 1%, whatever. Any death is a death, you know? And they talk about, oh, well, the police are feeling very tragic because they had to kill somebody. Oh, come on. Their responsibility is to protect and serve. They have a badge. They have a gun, they have the support of the city council, they have the report of almost everything going, and you're telling me that they're feeling bad about the number of people that have been killed? Then why internally hasn't the police department on their own took responsibility for correcting their own? It doesn't work. So I really support Elliott's proposal. And I can tell you, and this is the God's honest truth, it's not hyperbole or anything. Like I say, I've been working with people in the community for a long, long time. And I'm telling you, as soon as the mayor decided to go outside of this city and out of the state to get a research group from Chicago, one of the most crime-ridden cities in the United States, to come here and create a whitewash. How much money has been paid to this group? How much money? You should find out. You should know that. To come in here and just run through try to back and forth between Chicago and Portland and come up with a report, oh, everything's cool. It's all substantial compliance. Listen to what my man Elliott said and be very clear about his particular point. You can count trees. This paragraph meets that, this paragraph meets that, but what was the overall objective in the first place? Think about it.
Excuse me, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Barnett.
Sir? According to the Portland Cop Watch, I just got this document today. They mentioned that it's $303,000 a year that the COCO gets a year. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Pamela Fitzsimmons. I'm a Portland resident. I don't represent any association. I'm opposed to the amendment, okay? Let's have some political diversity here. The real elephant in the room is the fact that sometimes police have to kill. Last week, a man named Jeremy Christian was convicted of murdering 2 people on the MAX train. What's interesting about that case 3 years ago is the day before he killed those 2 people, the day before, the police encountered him in another incident. He was harassing someone. They let him go. He was mentally ill. Had they killed him then and there, he would have been martyred. You'd be feeling sorry for him. They didn't kill him. The next day, he killed 2 people. It happens. Like Commissioner Anderson says, there's no place to put many of these folks. The police end up having to deal with them. The problem with your amendment, Elliott, is you're going far afield. And I happen to like what Vadim suggested. It's pointed, and it justifies PSEP's existence. And I don't want to go too far afield on a tangent, but I'd like to point something out. Yes, an outfit in Chicago got the COCO agreement. But you know what? Joanne Hardesty's, Consult Hardesty, was in competition for that. And I think that needs to be duly noted.
Thank you for the comment.
Was she a commissioner at the time? She wasn't a commissioner at the time, right? No. Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Additional public comment on either the amendment or the full report.
I agree with what was said here and also what this gentleman back here said. And I think I wanted to point out when I said I agree with Vadim's response, I want to completely acknowledge that the amendment and what is said in the substance is necessary and that we should address it in some way or another, but the way as is does not get to the point we're trying to get at, especially because if we don't continue to exist after tomorrow, we won't be able to continue this work. And this is a continued process that's going to go on beyond the 2 years we've already existed. So it's really important that it gets passed and that we can get it continue to exist and continue to move forward with the work. Because it's going to be impossible to keep doing if we don't exist and if we address things that are off tangent from what we're trying to do.
Just a point of information. We will continue to exist for another year no matter what happens tomorrow, and all of the city leaders have suggested that they want us to continue to exist. So I don't think our decision on how to address the court should be hindered or impaired in any way by suggesting that PSEP will not continue to exist if we don't suggest substantial compliance.
It's
also they're not competing statements. They're not like one or the other. They're both talking about the settlement agreement as a whole. So one's not going to drown out the other, to speak on it. And it doesn't also prevent us from doing, Vadim, what you were saying, let's take a deeper look at this later on. We can make Elliott's statement tomorrow, we can make your statement tomorrow, and we can still, at the next meeting, go further in on it. So I don't feel that we we have to prioritize one over the other, like one's going to get drowned out. The court knows what it's doing. It knows what it's looking for, and to hear other viewpoints is necessary. You're going to have people tomorrow at this thing speaking on all range and matters around the settlement agreement, around policing in Portland. So we don't have to feel limited that we have to stick to the script that they put. In fact, we should go outside it and not read just from a specific script. We should go off things that are important to us. And so that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, I would just say quickly that I tend to agree. These are both different ways to measure success, and I think that they're both valid. As we're hearing, people in the community want to see compliance in one way, and other people want to see compliance in another way. And we can say both statements, say that we're committed to ensuring compliance that meets everyone's needs, and I think that's fine. Maybe we need to nail down the language, but either way, we're just saying that we're still committed to the work. We're committing to protect human life through one statement, and otherwise we're committed to ensuring compliance across a whole range of metrics, such as training, such as policy, and other things like that.
I just wanted to address that. Certainly these are not overlapping whatsoever. One is very pointed at what is going to be discussed and what it means to be PSEP and whether we are being supported and whether we are in accordance with the settlement agreement and whether the amendment that created PSEP should be adopted. The other one throws away everything else in the settlement agreement except for PSEP, which is a lot of things to be discussed. I'm not against it. I just don't think that they are the same thing at all. And I think that they both should be discussed in depth. If I spent 6 pages discussing Section 9, the rest of the settlement agreement deserves more than 3 or 4 lines. That's once again my agreement.
If you agree that maybe it's not a bad thing, I'm not understanding then why it can't be part of it.
Or Vadim, could it be a separate document that we also present tomorrow, like a separate statement, but that we also support or something like that?
That was my recommendation, that we have 2 votes. One on this thing that says that the PSEP is in conformance with the settlement agreement and that the amendments that created PSEP should be adopted. And then the second one is the other thing, which is the rest of the agreement is not in compliance, which is really what it means, and I hope everyone understands that. So we, as a committee, will be telling the judge if we vote upon this amendment together or separately that we think that the settlement agreement is not working. Just be very cognizant of that. And that is way more important than PSEP or what the amendment or whether PSEP or COAB or anything else exists going forward. That is of prime importance, and it is worth way more than 3 or 4 sentences. I just hope everyone realizes that. So yeah, I would propose it's 2 separate documents that we vote on today, at the very least, and I would certainly be welcome to discuss this at a later point in time when we have the time to discuss such a very weighty and big issue.
It would also be markedly different outcome than we had just a couple months ago when we voted on whether we believed the city to be in substantial compliance. There was a vote of this body, and we did not vote to say that it was not. So it would be a significant shift from that. I know, Ms. Brayfield, you had some comments on specifically on the Section 9 that you wanted to share.
I'm Ann Brayfield, concerned citizen, and I've been involved in all of this since probably about 2011 after seeing what happened here in the city in 2010.
Thank you for all your work, by the way. Always appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your work. And what I'm thinking that we're looking at this a little differently. I think that the judge should agree tomorrow to the amendments that give life to PSEP and its continuation, or however you want to look at that. And I don't think that it revolves around whether all of the paragraphs in 9 are substantial compliance, because and you are doing your job, and you're doing your job well, if you were to say that some of these, and specifically I'm looking at paragraph 145, 147, 148, and 149, where things need to be given to you to assist you in doing your job, and it's not clear yet that those things are in place and working and continuous and allowing you to do your very important work. So I don't think it's on you that things are not in substantial compliance. I think it's partial compliance for some of those things, and not because of something that's lacking in you, but there's something else going on in the system that's being worked out, and it's not up to you to work that system out. To work with it, yes, but to work it out, no. And so I think it's very important that the community see whether you have all of the tools in a regular way to do your work. Because if you don't have the data, you're not able to really look at the different parts of the community and see where things are working and where they're not working. So I think you need some of the things that you don't yet have or know that you have in any consistent kind of way. So I think you're raising your hand. And I think that raising your hand wouldn't prevent you from being brought into the amendments to the agreement being agreed to tomorrow. Because I think this is your chance to raise your hand and say, this is working, this is working, this is working, this is working. We're not sure, this hasn't really run its course. And I don't think you want to go into the 10 months approximately that are left not knowing or having to be battling maybe about those things. So that's just my perspective, which I think is a little different than yours.
I agree, Ms. Brayfield. Thank you very much for proposing that, and thank you for providing the statement earlier that we were all able to read about the actual substance of Section 9, and I wish that we had an opportunity today to discuss Section 9 and some of the amendments you put forth and some of the other feedback that we would have received other than discussing the rest of the settlement agreement, which is what we're doing right now.
I'd just like to add that I have a very different reading of the amendment. It says the city is in substantial compliance. It also says that there's still a long way to go to fulfill the spirit of the agreement. That doesn't say that the city is not in substantial compliance. Nowhere in this amendment does it say that. And
it's unconstitutional, come on.
It's unconstitutional is quoted in the settlement agreement.
Elliot, it's scarier to say it that way, so he's saying it that way. Don't worry about it, buddy.
Okay. Any more public comment on the amendment or the draft? Dan, we are well over time. So.
I'm very aware of that. Ms. Brayfield's point is very well made. The document that Mr. Mozierski wrote should have been Section 9 will allow us to do our work, but instead he wrote whether or not it's in substantial compliance. So he mixed the two things up. So I think you're fine to talk about whether there's compliance in the rest of the agreement, because that's already going beyond the fairness, accuracy, and reasonable question.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to take votes on this. The first thing we're going to do is vote on the substance of the amendment as proposed by Elliot. In other words, we are saying either yes, a yes vote says we want to adopt this amendment as part of the submission to the court for tomorrow. A no vote is no, we do not want to support this as part of the submission to the court tomorrow.
And just to reiterate, I've changed practice of unconstitutional conduct to practice of questionable conduct as per LaChiana's suggestion.
So we're not voting on it as a separate document?
It's one document. This amendment is to the whole document. That's what we're voting on.
And as your proposal, Elliot, is to add this to the main document as a concluding statement or something to that effect.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So that is what we are voting on. Okay. So again, I'm going to read the amendment. It would be added as a conclusion to the broad text of the document. So, and again, bear with me. We recognize that we stand on the shoulders of countless individuals and organizations who have been fighting for more just and equitable policing in Portland for generations, including several that are part of this very lawsuit. It is our goal and indeed mission to do our part to acknowledge the wrongs of the past, improve PPB policy and practice, and rebuild trust between the police and the community they serve. We are honored to be part of this effort and thank the city and our fellow Portlanders for their support. We find there is still a long way to go to fulfill the spirit of the agreement, in particular the requirement that the city and PPB put in place effective systems of oversight and self-correction that will identify and correct problems before they develop into patterns or practices of unconstitutional conduct and/or erode community trust. Given the continued high rate of police killings of people suffering mental health crises, the high rate of use of force incidents against people identified as mentally ill and homeless, and the disproportionate stops of black pedestrians and drivers, we conclude that there are no adequate measures in place to correct problems that have existed in Portland for more than a decade. While we applaud the efforts of the PPB to implement new training programs to address these issues, if the same patterns and practice of questionable conduct persist year after year, then we cannot conclude that the systems of oversight are in fact working. In conclusion, while we believe that the city is in substantial compliance with Section 9, we also believe that PSEP remains a work in progress with the need for continued efforts to build on our foundation of trust by expanding outreach to all corners of our city. That is the amendment on the table. We will start down on this side this time with Steve.
No.
Yes.
Aye.
No.
No.
Yes.
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 Okay. Motion passes. It will be added to the document as a conclusion. The amendment will. So that's the outcome.
Should we vote on the document as a whole?
Yep. Now we have to vote on the document as a whole, as drafted. The amendment. Let's see. Yeah, thank you. Lakiana, I was remiss. I didn't give you a chance to vote. And that's because the phone has died. So, someone, he's calling back. I don't know.
Hi, you've reached Lakiana 3. I'm unable to.
Maybe he will call. Technology's limitations. So now we're voting on the document as a whole. Again, the amendment that was proposed and passed will be appended as a concluding statement to be submitted to the proper folks tonight, late night.
Maybe it's a stupid question. If we vote it down, then we say nothing? Is that the...
Correct. If we vote it down, we don't have anything.
And individual people will testify as needed.
Correct. That's
or
right.
as they want.
That's right. It's not that we don't have it. We have no PSEP statement.
Oh, okay, yeah.
As I mentioned before, anyone can attend the court hearing tomorrow and testify as they see fit. So we're going to vote on the entirety of the document, starting down this way this time with Patrick.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
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 And Lakiana, that's not right.
He said you have to call him through FaceTime.
Yes on both.
He's yes on both. He's yes on both by proxy. Okay. So again, the result of this is that the document that that Vadim was responsible for drafting and did draft will be submitted to the court with the amendment as a concluding statement. We will be doing that tonight to an individual at the court that, as instructed to us by the DOJ, so that will be on file for them tomorrow morning, and several of us will be there to discuss that particular submission. Thank you all for the late night. Thank you all for your input, and we are adjourned.